We should be live. It's just loading. So we are live on YouTube.
Thank you. We're ready to proceed, Your Worship. Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's the most commonly used phrase in 2020 is you're muted. First of all, I'd like to welcome members of the public, of course, and anyone else watching to the first council meeting number 1. Tuesday, January 12th at 6:30 p.m. Of course, we are holding this meeting virtually in these COVID times, and I think many of our residents will now know, and our business leaders will now know that we are on the heels of yet another provincial announcement that will confine all public gatherings to 5 and introduce some additional COVID safety measures to our lives and our communities, all in the name of getting through this pandemic without overwhelming our healthcare system and, of course, keeping as many people healthy and safe as possible. So it is in that context that I think Council wishes everyone a happy new year. We do hope to turn the corner on what have been really exceptional circumstances, certainly since last March of 2020. I'm very pleased to have all of my council colleagues joining virtually from their homes, and we do hope that the internet, the rural broadband in some cases, is strong enough to sustain the participation of not just council colleagues, but many members of our staff, who obviously are also joining virtually, as well as some of our guests this evening. Before we do go into our delegations, it is important that I just note 2 things in addition to the information about COVID-19. And that, of course, is that last Sunday, January 3rd, we were extremely sad as a council and as a community to learn of the passing of North Gramble's first mayor, Mr. Donald Cameron. We did put out a statement recognizing his considerable and long-term service, not just to the municipality of North Grenville, but to the township of Oxford-on-Rideau, where he served as both councillor and then reeve. And of course, his leadership in navigating the early days of amalgamation, as well as his passion and enthusiasm for the retention of Ferguson Forest Centre. So we want, as we have already, we want in this meeting to publicly acknowledge and express our condolences and really recognize that we stand on the shoulders of individuals, certainly like Mr. Cameron. And I think all of this council had the opportunity to connect with Mr. Cameron during our first Canada Day, where he offered his vehicle and we were able to, if not ride with him, to walk alongside and get to know him a little better. So condolences to all those residents who came to know him, as well as obviously both family and close colleagues and friends. Secondly, very quickly, I would just like to thank, and I know Kristen Straker-Yan as liaison for emergency preparedness and services. We would like to, of course, thank the ongoing efforts of our volunteer fire service. It's tragically, we had 2 major residential fires on the weekend, one of which unfortunately is still under investigation. And the first of which happened in Featherston Park. Fortunately, in the case of Featherston, no lives were lost, but the very quick action of our volunteer fire service was absolutely critical to containing what could have been a far more devastating situation. In the second instance on Rock Road, as I think most of our community knows, that has now become quite unfortunately an OPP investigation, and many of us wait with bated breath for the outcome of that investigation, given a presumed loss of life, but that is yet to be confirmed. So again, just want to thank our volunteer fire service for their exceptional efforts to rise to the occasion time and time again. And also like to thank, of course, our chief and our deputy chief for their leadership and responsiveness. So it is on that note that we'll transition into the agenda. And if I could just turn to the clerk, are we approving a new agenda, Heather, or carrying on with the initial one?
We're carrying on with the initial one to confirm the meeting was called to order. The revised agenda was approved and no disclosures of interest were noted.
Great. So with that in mind, we've come out of a closed session and we're going to now go to section G. And that is, of course, presentations and delegations. And it's with pleasure that I welcome Gwendy Lapp, Health Promoter Project Lead for the Health Unit in regards to the Wellness Access for Youth presentation. And I believe Gwendy is with us this evening. Is that the case?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Ms. Lapp.
All right, thank you. And good evening, Mayor Peckford and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present WAY with you tonight, albeit virtually, like so many of our meetings these days. I'm just going to pause for a moment while I wait for the PowerPoint to come up. There we go. Perfect. All right. And if you want to move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, so with WAY, some of you might be more familiar with its previous name, which was the Mental Health Hub. If you're not familiar with either, that's okay also. I hope to be able to give you a little bit of background to WAY, as well as how it came to be, a sense of our progress, as well as some of the steps that we're taking along our journey these days. Next, please. So WAY first started as a partnership between the Kemptville District Hospital as well as Children's Mental Health of Leeds in Grenville. Back in about 2016, both organizations saw that there was a real gap in service when it came to mental health and addiction services for the youth and young adults in North Grenville in particular. And so they had a desire to explore what a hub could look like, and also wanted to get youth service providers involved in a further conversation. And so it really has evolved over the last few years. It is not the physical hub that was probably originally part of the vision, but it is a group of service providers that have chosen to work together as a collaborative and really are committed to helping youth, young adults, as well as their families be able to access mental health and addiction services locally here in North Grenville. Next slide, please. There were a number of gaps that were identified early on, and some of you are likely familiar with many of these gaps already. So I'll just touch on them briefly. The first one is system navigation. You can flip on that one. And with system navigation, it's really for both the youth and family, it was the whole, what's the right door? How do I access these services? And for service providers, it was also similar questions that they were asking. When it came to system coordination, which is the next one, it was really realizing that for many youth and families, they were having to tell their stories multiple times. And for service providers, it was trying to figure out who else was involved in their clients' care. The next one. It was also continued stigma, and we still see that today attached to anybody who's looking for addiction and mental health services as well as supports. And then service providers also saw a real need for education and skill building opportunities for their youth as well as for families. And it was things like communication, decision-making, problem-solving, parenting. Next slide, please. So based on our findings as a collaborative, we identified the following 4 strategic directions. And the first one was to increase access to the right services for where and when families needed them. Secondly, it was to leverage the service coordination with existing partnerships, and also then looking to create new partnerships as needed. Thirdly, it was to partner with youth and families to ensure that their needs and interests were being met and were included at all levels, whether that was planning, implementation, as well as evaluation. And lastly, to implement mental health and well-being initiatives that reduce stigma, increase protective factors for the youth, so things like resiliency, social connectedness, positive parenting, and lastly, addressing the social determinants of health. Next slide, please. At that same time, we also came up with our mission, vision, and values. And it's probably a little bit hard to read there on that slide. But our mission is to, as a community, work together to strengthen mental health and addiction services and promote mental well-being to support children, youth, families, and caregivers in North Grenville. Our vision is a community where children, youth, families, and caregivers are healthy and have the life skills to achieve their full potential. And then for values, we have 4 that we have listed there. And the first one is collaboration, working together on a shared vision by mobilizing local community assets. The second one is child, youth, family, and caregiver-centered care. So making sure that children, youth, families, and caregivers are at the center of their care. Thirdly is compassion. So demonstrating kindness and caring towards others, but also taking action to help. And then lastly, having youth-friendly environments. So wanting to create safe spaces and places where youth can gather. And a reflection of this value is the upcoming workshop that WAY is hosting. So next slide, please. We're excited to be inviting the Center of Excellence to facilitate a youth engagement workshop on Thursday, February 4th, for community partners. And while many of our organizations are already doing youth engagement in a variety of ways, this workshop will help to improve and measure our youth engagement efforts, as well as to explore best practices. And we would invite you and any of your staff to join us for this virtual workshop. Next slide, please. Other initiatives that WAY has been involved in just in the last year, maybe 2 years at most, a mental health walk-in clinic for children and youth opened in Kemptville in April of last year. And it is held every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Kemptville location, at the Kemptville campus. So it's Children's Mental Health of Leeds and Grenville. During COVID, the clinic does look a little different. It is not a walk-in clinic, unfortunately. We have had to move it to an appointment-based, so parents or families or youth do need to phone and make an appointment. They can either call the WAY 1-800 number or Children's Mental Health, their agency number. And it's because of the COVID screening that needs to take place currently. Children's mental health staff are still seeing people face-to-face when needed. Otherwise, services provided over the telephone or video conferencing. In early 2019, the WAY Collaborative also put in place a navigator, and his job is to help children, youth, and their families access the mental health and addiction services here locally. The WAY navigator, Dan McKinnon, is also a Connect Youth employee. And so he's able to access some of Connect Youth's supports and services as well, and can provide things like housing and transportation as well for youth. When a child or youth is struggling with a mental health or addiction challenge, their parents can also feel really helpless and alone. And Parents Lifeline of Eastern Ontario, we can just click on that slide again, Parents Lifeline of Eastern Ontario, they're another partner of ours, and they're staffed by parents who also have lived experience and have children of their own who have and or are still going through mental health and addiction challenges. And so they're able to offer support groups to parents in like situations. Since the pandemic began, they have had to move their in-person monthly meetings that happened at KDH to an online format instead. But they are able to offer them now weekly, and they are age specific. We can click a couple more times on this slide, I believe. Community support for WAY has been tremendous. In 2019, there were a number of campaigns to raise some much needed funds to help with the development of WAY. This past year, despite COVID-19, the Kemptville Tim Hortons Smile Cookie campaign, as well as the Yuletide campaign that was led by Craig McCormick, were an enormous boost to WAY. And so we're really grateful and acknowledge that we're part of a generous and supportive community here in North Grenville. You can click, I think, 2 more times. I think at one time it felt like the only way to support our youth and young adults with mental health and addiction challenges was to send them outside of the community of North Grenville. So often they were sent to CHEO and or to Hotel Dieu. And this no longer needs to be our first line of defense, as we do have a number of amazing supports here locally. And so our key focus for 2020 has really been to raise awareness of WAY and how youth, young adults and their families in North Grenville can access WAY supports. Our 1-800 line, as well as our email address, provide a single point of contact to be able to connect an individual with the appropriate service provider. And if you want to click the next couple, yep. WAY started also a media campaign in September of 2020, and it was primarily social media based. Facebook was for parents and caregivers, as well as service providers. But then looking at the youth and the young adults, it was also jumping on the Instagram platform, as well as TikTok. And many of the TikTok videos are actually created by youth here in North Grenville. And lastly is our YouTube channel, which we are working on, also coming soon. If you want to click again. When we consider how to best serve the mental health and addiction challenges of the youth and young adults in our community, collaboration between community partners is essential. And it's probably best seen in the following story. Not that long ago, we received a referral from the Education and Employment Center, and they had an older youth from Kemptville, but was living in Ottawa in a homeless shelter. And this particular youth really wanted to move back into the area, back into Kemptville, but they needed a number of supports in order to get back here. And some of the supports that they needed were things like they had a really rough relationship with mom. They were in need of food, they needed a source of income, and they required transportation to be able to get to and from appointments, as well as potential job interviews. And so it was one of those webs that when one string is pulled, it really affects everything else in this individual's life. And so WAY's navigator was able to connect with this individual and was able to just smooth over the relationship with mom so that the youth could move back home. And then WAY was also able to help with some of those initial groceries for the family so that the family didn't take a financial hit when this individual first moved back home. The individual also needed to be able to get to a job interview that they had acquired. And so Dan was able to provide the transportation and get this individual there. And then when the youth actually landed the job, Dan was able to make sure that this person had the appropriate clothing needed to be able to actually do the job and to be able to do it safely. And so that's just kind of one way or one example of some of the things that WAY is able to do when we work together as a collaboration on mental health and addictions. The counseling sessions provided by Children's Mental Health of Leeds and Grenville, also by Lanark Leeds and Grenville Addictions and Mental Health, are so important. And so are the other supports, the social determinants of health that are provided by our other community partners, such as Connect Youth, that really also play a role in one's mental health and well-being. And we all have a part to play in that. Next slide, please. Including council. I had the chance to take a peek at your 2019 work plan, and it lists a safe, healthy, and cohesive community as one of your strategic focus areas. And as I read through it, I really saw how WAY is a natural fit with many of the key issues that you have listed there. And as members of WAY, we're really grateful for your support as council. We continue to focus on increasing access to, as well as awareness of, mental health and addiction services for children and youth in North Grenville. And so really our question, our ask for council is how can you lend a hand to ensure that every youth, every family, every young adult knows of WAY and knows how to access the supports that WAY provides. Next slide. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Well, first of all, Ms. Leff, thank you so much for that presentation. As I think you're aware, you've had a conversation with some of us. Youth engagement is a critical part of our mandate, and we feel passionately that we need to do our part in joining exceptional service providers to respond to the mental health needs of the community. And it's a neat transition that you describe between, parents having nowhere to go and now multiple places to go, certainly in terms of some of those front end services that at least get people on the right path and don't always take people out of the community. I think that matters a great deal to us, especially as we've grown, but not necessarily have all the pieces been put into place to always serve youth well. So we certainly appreciate the work of you and your agencies. I'll turn it over to council colleagues for any questions, and we'll go from there. Council, anything you'd like to add? Council Strachan?
Thank you very much for that presentation, Gwendy. I think it's always great to hear about new services in our community. I have kids, and so for sure it's something that's a high priority on my list as well. I'm wondering, have you seen significant changes in the use of the services for WAY or needing to access those services because of COVID and some of the challenges that youth are facing right now? I know that people are struggling on various fronts. There's a lot of challenges right now, and I'm just wondering if you're able to share anything on that side of the equation.
Yeah, for sure. I know that I've just recently had conversations with both of the mental health providers that I mentioned, Children's Mental Health, as well as Lanark Leeds and Grenville Addictions and Mental Health Services. And both of them have said that, particularly since September, they have both seen a huge increase in the number of referrals that they are receiving. So, I don't know that it's a surprise to any of us with, COVID and the restrictions and what that is doing for mental health and addictions, but we definitely have the statistics from both of those agencies that there is a rise, definitely.
Well, I think it's incredible then, even more so now than it was previously, to have that service right in our community because of the further restrictions of not being able to travel and lockdown and so on, that we can access those things easily and not have to go into CHEO and have the other concerns add to the stress. So yes. I do have one more question though, because you did mention it and I missed the date when you said it, the WAY virtual workshop that you brought up. When is that occurring?
So it's Thursday, February 4th. It is from 10 to 11:30 in the morning. And I can certainly connect with the clerk and send out, because I do have an Eventbrite registration link that I can provide for anybody who wants to register and participate in that workshop.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you very much, Wendy.
Absolutely.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Thank you for that very informative presentation, Gwendy. As Councillor Strackeryan has stated, I also experience the difference in my grandchildren without their sports and the contact with the school friends and all of those sorts of things. It's tough on the kids. I think tougher than we maybe realized. I just wanted to know. One is that I would like to take part in that virtual workshop, so I look forward to getting the contact information. But do you have send out information through all of the schools in North Grenville for parents to be aware of the services that there are?
So we have made connections with each one of the schools. The two schools that probably I shouldn't say get the least information, but probably send out the least information would be the two French speaking schools. We recognize that the French piece we need to be a little bit better at. They do have some of our promotional materials because we did make sure that some of it is in French. And we understand that that is the only way that they'll distribute that information to parents is if it's in French. But yes, we have sent out information to both of the other two high schools as well as the elementary students or elementary schools, because they also, our service provision is to age 12 to 25. So some of those grade 6 students would also be in that category. Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, thank you for all the good work that you do. It's very important. So thanks very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Council colleagues, anything else? Before we say goodbye to Ms. Lapp, I understand, could you just underscore for council what the funding model is? So, you've got this hub concept, but how does it all keep going? Who are the primary contributors? And do you have plans for expansion or for further iterations of your services? I'm just trying to figure out how it keeps
ticking away.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So the bulk of our funding comes through Kemptville District Hospital, and they receive a pot of money. I believe it's through the LIN. I could be wrong there, so don't quote me on that one. But I know that it is specific money that's given to them, and they put it towards mental health, which is way. That we also get some funding through KDH Foundation, does some fundraising for us. And then also, some of those smaller fundraisers that I mentioned yeah. As far as right now, I think because of COVID, having a physical space would still be a dream that we would love to see come to fruition. COVID kind of puts brakes on that for the time being, because that is difficult. Right now we can't do face-to-face anyways. But that would be something that continues to be on our back burner. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And I think, just for council's knowledge, there has been some informal discussion at Kemptville campus, I think, about potential use of a particular space for youth peer support groups and other kind of youth-led activities of a smaller nature that would enable access to other kinds of mental health support. So that conversation is ongoing, I understand, with the campus, which is great.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Barkley. I know that we have 2 presentations waiting in the wings, so I'll look to wrap things up, but of course, give my colleagues who haven't had a chance to speak a last opportunity. Councillor Barkley.
Thanks for that presentation, Gwendy. I just wanted to make you aware of another group that sort of touched base here in North Grenville. You may be aware of them, Generation SDG. It's from the United Nations Association, and they're very involved in activating civic engagement with youth in the community. It doesn't really necessarily have a mental health focus, but I've got your email address. I'm happy to send you the information that I have.
Yeah, that'd be great.
part in a focus group, and there was Connect Youth and the health unit involved in this focus group mid-December. So happy to pass that along.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you again, Ms. Lapp, and do stay in touch with us in regards to the work. Deputy Mayor, I assume you're passing this evening. Is that the case? Yeah.
Well, I'll thank Gwendy for taking the time for sure to present to us. I'm not sure if Councillor Strackerjen said something about our own local youth center, and if you guys coordinate together. They have a big space. I don't know if you've talked to them, if there's any relation between you guys, or thinking maybe in the future some kind of partnership or not, but just a thought.
Yeah, we have had conversation. I do chat with Barb on occasion, and that is one key area where our Way Navigator has been able to, especially now during COVID, build relationships with the youth. And it actually is a number of the KYC youth who have created the TikTok videos that I mentioned earlier. So that is a partnership that we value, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Good.
Yeah.
And I'm delighted to hear you're on TikTok. It's among other social platforms, not just TikTok, but we understand TikTok is extremely well utilized by many youth of this day and age. And I remember I did a quick presentation to a grade 9 civics class just before the holidays. And I asked them what platform they used most, and resoundingly TikTok was the answer. And I don't think there are exceptions. I think they are the rule. So kudos to you for getting out there and getting in front of youth in different, in ways that are translatable to them. It's wonderful work you're doing. And we hope as a council, we can only serve to enable it in the months and years ahead. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
For sure. Take care. Stay in touch.
Okay. Will do.
Okay.
So, Your Worship, there's a resolution that Council received this presentation, Wellness Access for Youth.
Great. Can I look to Councillors Strackerjan and O'Sullivan to move and second that report, please? And then I will call the vote, and I'll just look for objections at this time. Any objections? Clerk, I assume I can do that. I can just ask for objections.
Yes.
Okay, good. It passes. Thank you. Second up this evening, and also quite substantive, is representatives from MDB Insight. I'm not sure who we have with us today. I have quite a full screen. So Clerk, maybe I'll have you name them. I think we have Clark Hoskin here. We've got Kai, and is there a third representative, or is it just Clark and Kai this evening? Just you guys? Not just, but of course there was a third person named. Of course, MDB Insight was retained by the municipality to respond to, I think, what was significant council enthusiasm for the development of a really cohesive, future-looking tourism strategy. So I think we're very happy to welcome you this evening, MDB reps, and I believe I'm turning it right over to you, or are we hearing from Mr. Gilmer first? Mr. Dyke, what's the scenario here?
Thank you, Your Worship. It would be Mr. Gilmer who do the introduction for the presentation.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I'll go to Mr. Gilmer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Beckford. If I can unmute myself here. I'll just do a quick sound check to make sure everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
Good, okay. So just give a quick background first. In 2019, North Grenville launched a new dedicated tourism program. This included the launch of a new Explore North Grenville website, the hiring of a tourism summer student, the launch of a new social media channels, and the creation of our first dedicated visitor guide in 2020. In early 2020, the municipality received a $20,000 grant from a regional tourism organization to help develop a tourism strategy. An RFP process was conducted, and MDB Insight was awarded the contract. A steering committee was formed, including representatives from the North Grenville Chamber of Commerce, Old Town Kemptville BIA, as well as the mayor and staff. The development of the strategy included site visits, stakeholder meetings, public information sessions, and a resident and business survey. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the many businesses and community partners who were involved in the development of this strategy, including the BIA, Chamber of Commerce, and the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville. We're looking forward to working with these partners as we move forward with the implementation of the tourism strategy. It has been a pleasure working with the MDB team over the past few months, and we are excited that they are here tonight to present the North Grenville tourism strategy. And of course, we'd like to thank our funders, RTO9, for providing us with the funding to help support this project. Following this meeting, the next steps will be for staff to review the strategy and report back to council with a plan for tourism service delivery for North Grenville. I would now like to introduce Clark Hoskin from NDB Insights, who is here to present our new tourism strategy. Clark, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight, and really enjoying the chance to see some faces from North Grenville again. We really enjoyed the project. Joining me tonight is Kai Lipens, our research analyst on this project. And if you can just go to the next slide, please. And Paul Blay, who's our senior vice president, is unfortunately not able to join us. He's on another council call in another community tonight. But Kai and Paul and myself, we're happy to be your consulting team. And in fact, Kai and I both brought our partners down to North Grenville for a trip. Paul came as well. His partner wasn't able to come, but he clearly made friends while he was here. So if we can move on to the next slide. A little bit about the project, and Matt did go into it, but I did want to touch base briefly on the concept that tourism involves attracting new dollars to the community. It's defined as tourists are defined as someone who travels outside their normal pattern of behavior. So we are definitely talking about an export industry. You're exporting an experience to people who are coming into your community. So the strategy process began in September. We reviewed over 20 documents and analyzed over 75 tourism assets in the area. So you can go to the next slide, please. And also the community engagement was quite overwhelming. There's clearly a lot of support for tourism in North Grenville with the various workshops that were performed, the huge response to the resident and business survey that we received, as well as interviews with many of your tourism industry informants, as well as other partners with agencies and organizations who also deal with tourism. And the various discussions we had with North Grenville staff helped inform our strategy and our recommendations moving forward. Next slide, please. So after we received the various inputs and analyzed documents and that type of thing, we prepared our version of a SWOT analysis, which is basically a strengths, opportunities, aspirations, risks, and results. And by looking at all those various aspects of your tourism industry, we're able to come up with some findings and recommendations. And also on the next slide, you'll see that we actually talked about the economic impact. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So within North Grenville, tourism actually represents a very large part of your economy. It represents over 9% of the jobs located in North Grenville, and sort of along the Rideau Canal area, the various 11 municipalities in the region, it contributes almost $695 million in economic impact. So it's very important. And the fact that you have 415 direct jobs in tourism in North Grenville tells a huge story of the importance of it in your community. Certainly if you had one employer who employed 400 people, they would be elevated as a very important employer in your community. So tourism is very important. Next slide, please. Part of the analysis of the industry in North Grenville included looking at your core attractors, and these are things that actually bring people to the area. And a lot of it is nature oriented, obviously, the Rideau River, the Ferguson Forest, various other hamlets, and Kemptville itself all draw people to the area. Next slide. So basically, there are 4 major attractions in North Grenville, and some of them aren't actually located in North Grenville, but they're very important to the municipality, and the Rideau River Provincial Park is one of those for sure. But also Kemptville Live and the Rideau Woodland Ramble are examples of actual tourism attractions that attract large numbers of people. And there are several other emerging attractions and supporting attractions within North Grenville. Next slide, please. Part of the tourism survey that was done showed some very interesting support for tourism within your community. The over 250 people who responded to the survey that we did, and you can flip to the next slide too, showed a great willingness to share the community with tourists. So asking them if they would agree to see more, less, or similar amounts of tourism activity in their community, the wide majority were quite willing to share what they have here. So downtown Kemptville, the campus, the villages, the parks, the waterfront, people are quite happy to share those and see more activity involving tourists to the area. So overwhelmingly, the residents of North Grenville in the survey feel tourism is a positive thing, and with good management, any kind of negatives can be mitigated, and so certainly that's a very positive sign. Sorry. The next slide, please. So using all this input and all this data and all this background feedback that we got, we were able to come up with 3 strategic priorities. And so basically the first one is around collaborating with the business operators and others to build a strong, reliable, and unique tourism draw. The second one is around branding. So branding your destination as something that's current, innovative, curious, generous, family-oriented, something different from what's around you. And then a third strategic priority basically centers around leveraging your existing assets. So using what you have now as backdrops for high yield, high value experiences for tourists and locals. And when I say high yield, we mean revenue oriented. We don't necessarily want to draw more people to the area, but we want to draw people to the area who will spend more when they come. Next slide, please. So we came up with a series of actions, and I'm not going to read them all to you, obviously, but you can look through the report and see all the various steps that are included in these actions. The first one being around the infrastructure and the development of your industry. And what we hope will happen is that North Grenville will aggressively pursue developing what's called tourism product. Tourism product is the experience, it's the business, it's the story that the business tells, it's the product the business tells, or the service. And so certainly we hope that North Grenville will work more closely, and not that it isn't already, but continue to be really aggressive in terms of getting the businesses to work together, as well as maybe doing some public realm projects that can help to attract the type of tourists that you want to have in the area. Next slide, please. So another one is around the whole idea of the backdrop, your existing assets and using them as a backdrop for tourism. And the Kemptville campus, we have to say, is an amazing asset that you have, and I know you're aware of that. Many communities would be are envious, would be happy to have this asset. And so we hope that you will fast track development of experiences on the campus. There's an excellent master plan that's been made available, and it does have some great ideas and opportunities in it. We really hope that you accelerate some experiences on the campus related to culinary, to overnight stays, to events, and to other types of experiences. Next slide, please. Also, monetizing outdoor experiences. And what we mean here is that moving beyond simply passive tourism along trails and in parks, what you want to do is get outfitters and guides and other types of small business people to create experiences that people can purchase, that they can sign up and be a part of. And obviously this is a kind of a post-COVID stage, but when COVID does eventually pass, there will be a lot of pent-up demand for people wanting to get out into the outdoors, to celebrate the water and to do many other types of experiences. The other aspect about this area too is that North Grenville is on the route for the LeBoat self-drive houseboat operations. So that's another excellent asset that you should be leveraging moving forward with tourism. Next slide, please. This action is around your target customer. And the words that we use in this action will change from year to year and from generation to generation. In this case, we're saying, be the place that owns fit, sweet, and lit. And if you have young people in your family, you'll know that these words mean they're positive words that a community is aiming towards a younger demographic. So you want to be that community that understands that target customer and aims at them and innovates the experiences that they may wish to have. Certainly for decades, Kemptville attracted young college students full of ideas and energy, and that energy and those ideas haven't left your community, even though perhaps the college is no longer there. So build on that brand that you have of being the place that is lit and sweet. Next action, please. An action that we talked to the steering committee about and numerous stakeholders was the idea of branding the tourism destination as Kemptville. And certainly using a brand in tourism that is unknown or confusing is poor marketing, and it's a waste of money. So you certainly want to maximize a brand that you already have that's been around for over 100 years, that people know where it is, that you don't have to repeatedly answer the questions about where you are. We hope that North Grenville will reclaim awareness of Kemptville and use it to not only help the town itself, but obviously any success that happens in Kemptville is going to be shared across the whole municipality. Next slide, please. The final action is around partnership again. So actively partnering with tourism neighbors and friends, as we say, for added value. And this concept comes around working obviously with your regional partners like RTO9, but also neighboring communities. There are lots of other players around you that you can work with. In tourism, we have to look at our neighbors as partners, not competitors. But always remembering that you as a community are driving your own destiny. You're in charge of where you're going to be going. The idea around help and be helped, that means that whatever you contribute to the success of your neighbors and your partners will be returned to you. So if you help your neighboring communities with tourism, they're going to help you as well. It's a team effort. The idea around thinking outside of the box is we really want you to look beyond the everyday experiences and the kind of same old type of idea as to what you should be doing for tourism in the area. Take an opportunity on a regular basis to work with your partners, your businesses, to think about the various alliances and prospects that may be out there. And the report goes into some detail about connections with Ottawa and the various communities and affinity groups and sports groups that are located there that may certainly find a home in North Grenville from a tourism perspective that you should think about and certainly add value to those experiences. On the next slide, please. So moving these various strategic directions and actions are all good, well and good. And North Grenville has done an excellent job in getting to where you are now. Certainly, many of these directions moving forward can't really be expanded within the current budget. There is certainly general support from residents through the survey for a dedicated tourism budget that is enhanced and can help move the ball down the field, so to speak, on a variety of these actions, and particularly around the whole concept of tourism product development. Next slide, please. So the next steps from our point of view and what we're recommending as the consultants for this project is to show leadership the municipality really does need to put resources in place to really prioritize the actions of this strategy. Tourism is a complex industry. It involves a lot of different types of businesses, many of whom don't even know they're in the tourism industry. They know that they serve customers, but they don't necessarily identify as tourism businesses. And so the idea of having someone who is aggressively working with them on a regular basis to boost up the product and the experience and the services and great offerings that the businesses have, that's going to help your tourism industry. What it also does is it unites your industry together in terms of collaborating, and it will certainly help rally support around the concept of building on the Kemptville campus. You have a definite hub there in a variety of ways that can be leveraged, and we really hope that you'll put the resources in place that are needed to get this strategy going. Next slide, please. So we did come up with a very rough budget, and it talks about some salary and benefits, obviously, for a staff person and some summer students. We really would like to see the product development side of things be focused upon before marketing starts, or at least before marketing is really ramped up. And this is really helping your businesses with making sure that they have enough market readiness, that they're prepared for the tourism market that we've identified. Working with them around photos and videos and having familiarization tours for writers and that operators and that type of thing. Having the meetings and the workshops that are necessary to identify what they need to do to build on their businesses and take advantage of some of these opportunities. And as well, working with other partners and other communities costs money as well. So when you want to go and meet or learn and do some professional development, that costs something, that also costs an amount. And obviously marketing is another area that's always expensive, whether it's digital or print. It costs money in a very noisy marketing world to raise your voice up and have it heard above all the other people that are out there marketing. So that's very important as well. Next slide, please. So finally, just looking ahead, obviously putting resources in place are going to really have a tangible effect on what North Grenville can do for its tourism industry. We see great spirit and fortitude and intent within your tourism industry and within your community. It's an excellent momentum that we certainly would like to see continue. So harness this energy that you have right now, and be prepared for when the pandemic ends. And I really want to leave this this presentation on the note of my personal experience and that of my wife when we came to North Grenville was very much of a hospitable, welcoming community. And you can, by all means, maximize the demand that is there for people who want to get out and experience things once it's safe to do so. A lot of communities are not preparing. They're not ready. But with your strategy and with your people in your community who are really excited and enthusiastic, I have no doubt that you're going to benefit from being ready once the doors open again for tourism. So basically, that's our presentation. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And we certainly look forward to seeing what happens in North Grenville, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Clark. Obviously, I had the benefit of being part of several conversations in the lead up to the presentation. So I'll only ask one, and it's really for the benefit of my council colleagues and members of the media and others who may be watching this evening. We really, I think, emphasized with you how competitive the tourism market is, with big budgets in the city of Ottawa, well-established destinations, certainly in Merrickville, Perth, a number of other, outstanding small communities that are certainly around us and in very close proximity, and are often, we often marvel, I think, here in North Grenville that Kemptville is a bit of a bypass destination on the way to other very well-established, I think, communities where there is very strong brand recognition, and lots of years in the tourism business. So I was interested by what you said in terms of how to brand North Grenville using that more youthful, kind of innovative, energetic spirit. Could you just speak a little bit more to that in terms of what you think it means for North Grenville to go down that path or leverage the history with the Kemptville campus and how that works in what is an extremely competitive environment?
Certainly. And the three things that come to mind are kind of music and culture, food and drink, and fitness and exercise and recreation. All of those things you have in your community. You have excellent trails and outdoor experiences for people to run and hike and do all the various outdoor activities that relate to that youth demographic, that younger adult that desires that type of experience. Secondly, around food and drink, you've got excellent restaurants. You've got a farming community that's poised to contribute to that. So the whole local food initiative, and that's very hot among the younger markets. And then thirdly, just events and music and culture. You already have an excellent festival, unfortunately postponed at the moment. But once the economy opens back up again, that same youthful group and demographic is going to want to get out and celebrate. And so having those event venues and excellent music and culture that they can come to is very advantageous. And the fact that you're close to so many large urban areas helps as well. So I think those three are really what will help drive that youth demographic to Kemptville and North Grenville.
Thanks. I'll turn it to council colleagues, and I have Councillor Sullivan with her hand up, and I presume others may join in after. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm very, very pro promoting tourism and promoting North Grenville and Kemptville as a place to come, place to be, place to stay and play. So I really enjoyed that presentation, but as a silver-haired person here, I want to focus on the active seniors that I think are very important to include in the demographic that you want to attract. In terms of cycling, for example, Kemptville is located halfway between the Ottawa River, and then you have the Rideau River, and then the St. Lawrence River. And I think when you talk about partnering with neighbors to get cycle trails that go all the way, I mean, the demographics of people who cycle are they have more money, they stay longer, they spend more. So I think that's another way that we could maybe market Kemptville as it's a great location in between those places. So I really like this presentation, and thank you very much for that. So I'm all in favor of promoting our lovely town. And I'd love to see more waterfront stuff, like a paddle, picnic and pedal. So you can bike in the morning, have a picnic, and kayak in the afternoon or whatever. So great stuff, and look forward to getting some action here.
The 60 plus set uses the word lit all the time. Council colleagues, anything else? Councillor Barkley?
Yeah, thank you, Clark, for that presentation. It certainly confirms a lot, I think, of what the council has thought about tourism, that there's a lot of pent-up demand and there's a lot of things that we haven't really exploited. The focus on monetizing some of the experiences that you talked about is good to hear, to get away from that sort of passive enjoyment of some of our amenities, and to really help the business community capitalize on what we have. I've always said what is unique is valuable, and to focus on things that are unique about Kemptville, I think is really important. Some of our unique businesses are one of a kind you won't find anywhere else. And certainly our trails are a unique feature that we can exploit. And I'd also like to underscore heritage tourism. I think we have been really, we've fallen down in terms of preserving our heritage buildings. And I think there's a lot of interest in stories, as you mentioned, and we've got a unique story to tell the rest of the greater community. So thank you for that. I think it really resonated with me, and I'm looking forward to translating that into action and having a dedicated budget to execute some of these suggestions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Strachan?
Yes, thank you all for that presentation. I think it was, I think it echoed a lot with what a lot of us already see on a regular basis in our community. I guess I would just say that in context of sort of the last, well, better part of a year for COVID, we focused a lot on local businesses, local services, local amenities, outdoor amenities, and so on. And so you've touched on a lot of those. So I think if there's a silver lining to what this pandemic has brought us, is it's forced us to look internally, and hopefully with your presentation and the focus on those points and how to make it happen, I think we can probably continue a lot of that momentum that's been built up to look at what we have locally, and everything down to the local food source, the farms. It's sort of all come to the surface for perhaps a lot of people who haven't seen it, and a lot of people who are new to our community as it's been growing. So just thank you for putting that all together in one nice package for us to reference as well. So yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Sorry. Deputy Mayor, is there anything you want to add before we move on?
No, good presentation though, Clark. I do enjoy numbers, so the stats tweak my interest at the beginning there. That I'll have to review those again. Those are good. Thanks.
Okay. So the critical path. So Clark, just from your perspective, just in the context of COVID, because some people might ask, why consider spending, up to $200,000, right, in this very tumultuous and unprecedented period? You said be ready for the kind of post-COVID universe. Obviously, your leaders in the tourism field, what are you telling communities like ours that are on the cusp of really kind of, I think, more aggressively shaping its tourism sector, or already there? Again, I don't need you to speculate about public health, but what's your sense of how ready should we, how ready is ready, given what we think is, obviously the end of the pandemic on the horizon at some point soon?
Well, thank you, Mayor Peckford, and I think it's a lot about planning ahead. So, obviously, there won't be much of a tourism industry this spring and summer. Probably it'll be 2022, frankly, before things really open back up again. But the idea is that when you focus on product development and helping your businesses, that can start today. It's not something that you have to wait for. You can do a lot of work by brainstorming and coming up with solutions and coming up with various ideas on itineraries and experiences and that type of thing. So perhaps you don't have to commit the full $200,000 this year to all the marketing and that type of thing, but perhaps prorate it over a period of time so that you're ramping up to 2022. But I do think it's very important to start that collaboration, start that communication with your businesses, and also reaching out to the partner communities and all the various other associations that you can lean on. We often say in tourism that if you really want to move into a new market, you got to commit 3 years out to really see results. And so you're really at the beginning of a journey. And so the sooner you get into that journey, the better, because it'll take a couple years before you start to see results. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Oh, I think very much so, because I think that's our critical question, as how to get ready. Just one more while we have you. The function of that tourism development coordinator, whatever you called it, you noted was, I think, in part to support businesses who may not even understand they're serving a tourism clientele, right? Can you explain in simple terms why you think that particular position is so valuable in terms of kind of giving shape. And I'm genuinely asking the question. I don't think I know the answer in full. So if you could tell us, describe to us why that particular piece is so critical in your view.
Thank you. I believe it's critical because small businesses are the mainstay of tourism, especially in a smaller community like yours. Small businesses are owned and operated by independent entrepreneurs who don't have a lot of time. They need they're smart people. They know what they're doing every day. But often to point out new opportunities to them or to try to get them to think a little outside of the box requires some prodding, some diplomatic prodding, and certainly getting them to look at the other businesses in their community as not competition, but as partners. How can they work with our other businesses in the community? So really the role of a tourism development coordinator is to open their eyes, is to get them to talk to each other, to get them to know each other, to see the opportunities that they can share and leverage with each other. And that just takes time and communication and visits and calls and finding the right time to talk to them, coming back to them again and again, bugging them diplomatically, as I say. It's really a relationship that you have to develop. And so it's not something you turn on a light switch. It takes time. You have to earn the trust of the businesses. You have to they have to see that you're adding value to what they're trying to do. And so it'll take some time to get their trust and to gain their interest. And especially those who may not, they may run a restaurant, but they don't think tourism is part of what they do. And, you don't often see the tourists. They have to be pointed out to you, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess that's my point, is that really rallying and getting people to work together and herding those cats takes time and energy, and it takes dedication. And that's why I think it's important to have that person.
So one can argue that an investment in tourism in this way is really an investment in our local economy and our smallest businesses, some of which may have been extremely hard hit by COVID-19, right? Because we're expanding a clientele for them to serve, either seasonally or otherwise, depending on the nature of the business.
That's correct. And if I may add, like any kind of economic development effort, a tourism development coordinator is going to be able to ferret out all of those various programs and supports and things that are available to tourism businesses and communicate them directly to them and help them. And they'll really love you for that as well.
And there, in your experience, those supports exist. When you say those programs, those supports, you're talking about funding opportunities, you're talking about what exactly?
So it can be everything from funding programs from various levels of government, but it also can often mean regional partnerships with other businesses or other like experiences. So your tourism development coordinator will get to know what other communities are doing and then help tie in your businesses to those. So the canal is a perfect example. There may be river experiences up and down the canal, the river, that your businesses can tie into. And the businesses may not necessarily know that because they're so focused on their day-to-day, whereas the coordinator will help remind them or let them know that they can co-market or cooperatively market with some other businesses. So there's lots of different ways to give them a leg up. Sure.
Great, thank you. Thank you for letting me go down that path. In a community of limited resources, really trying to fully understand and appreciate the impact of that kind of investment is really important to us. So appreciate that. Council colleagues, any remaining thoughts on the tourism report? Seeing none, I'll look to the clerk to give us the motion, I believe, to receive the report this evening.
It's two parts: receive the North Grenville tourism strategy and direct staff to report back to council with a plan for tourism service delivery and budget. Okay, Councillor Sullivan, are you moving that? Great, and I'll look for a seconder then. Thank you, Councillor Barkley. I'll call a question. Any objections? I think I'll note, council colleagues, as we're about to embark upon budget deliberations, it'll be critically important that this piece be considered as part of certainly some of the recommendations that are going forward from council. So I think we'll look to Mr. Dyke and Mr. Gilmore to give us a recommendation about whether or not we're spending in this year, if it's attainable to spend in this year, and embark upon that 3-year journey. Want to thank Mr. Hoskin, of course. Kai, your last name isn't on the screen. I apologize. But I know that I think both of you spent some time, and Kai in particular, I think spent part of the Thanksgiving weekend touring around with me and my kids, parts of North Grenville that he had not seen before. So appreciate all of you taking the task so seriously and really rising to the occasion and working creatively and I think smartly on what I hope will be a very successful tourism strategy in the long run. So I appreciate the work MDB Insight. Thank you. So council colleagues, we have one more presentation in the wings from, I think, Mr. Glenn Tunnock, if I'm not mistaken. Perhaps we can get that one done and then take a short break. Council has been meeting since 5, so you'll staff and I think media will understand we will need a quick break once we get through this last presentation. I'm just going to call up the agenda, and this is to deal specifically with the building division fee schedule changes. And who is introducing the subject matter at hand, or am I going straight to Mr. Tunnock?
Mr. LaRue, please, your worship.
Okay, thank you. Mr. LaRue, fire away.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. I would like to thank council for the opportunity to present my report regarding proposed building division fee changes and additions to provide for cost recovery of the building division services. I would also like to thank council, the press, members of the local builders association, and the public for taking the time to attend tonight's meeting. The building division has undertaken a review of the building division fees to ensure we are achieving cost recovery for the building division services in order to maintain and improve our customer service levels. In order to achieve this, we have hired Glenn Tunnock of Tunnock Consulting Limited to perform a building permit fee review to identify the full cost of providing our services. We have also provided 3 separate opportunities to the building community to discuss the proposed fees, which resulted from Mr. Tunnock's report. We held 2 Zoom meetings and 1 in-person meeting. The Zoom meetings were recorded, and copies of those recordings were sent to the building community. As you will see tonight, we have attempted to address the concerns of the building community, either by providing further clarification or making changes to the bylaw. Mr. Tunnock's review will demonstrate the full cost of providing all building division services. It also identifies and qualifies the need to create fees that would also contribute to a building reserve fund. The data presented by Mr. Tunnock has resulted in the proposed amendments to bylaw 10215, consolidated fees and charges for municipal departments, and the repealing and replacement of bylaw 1498, the municipal building bylaw. The proposed fees will provide opportunity to maintain and improve our service delivery to the residents of North Grenville and the building community. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Tunnock for his presentations.
And if I may interject, Your Worship, there is a public meeting procedure attached to this presentation and report. There is a blurb that needs to be read out because this matter is in accordance with Section 7 of the Building Code. Oh, you're muted.
Right.
Oh, you're muted again.
I'm going to look to council colleagues. I didn't understand that nuance to this section of the meeting. I'm going to look to council colleagues. Would they prefer to pause now and come back for what might be a more fulsome discussion than I'd initially understood, or council, do you wish to carry on? Looking for guidance. Are we good to stay the course here?
Yeah, let's carry on. I'm anxious to hear.
Okay, and then we will allow for a break, a 10-minute break for colleagues. Thank you, Ms. Babcock-Cormier. I'm going to look for the blurb, which I believe would be attached to the agenda, or would you like to read it on my behalf?
If you'd like, I've got it up. I can read it on your behalf.
Okay, why don't you do that? Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's meeting is a public meeting held under the authority of Section 7 of the Building Code Act. This meeting was also advertised in accordance with the requirements of the Building Code Act. The purpose of this meeting is to consider proposed changes to building permit fees, including the introduction of new fees. The public meeting is intended to provide an opportunity for the public to voice their support or to express their objections or concerns with respect to the proposed building permit fee schedule. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to the Chief Building Official, Steve Leroux, via email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information for the Chief Building Official can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. The format of the meeting will be as follows. Presentations will be made by Glenn Tunnock, the consultant who conducted the review of the building permit fees, and then by Steve Leroux, the municipality's chief building official. Following presentations, anyone who wishes to speak for or against the proposed changes will be given the opportunity to do so by clicking the raised hand option in the meeting, or they can raise their hand. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there any people here for this public meeting? If so, could you please acknowledge yourself? I do not believe there are actually any members of the public other than the 2 members of our media attending the meeting tonight.
Okay.
So we can pass the meeting over now to Glenn Tunnock to present.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Tunnock.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of council and members of the public. It's certainly a pleasure to meet with you this evening and to present a highlighted version, if you wish, of my particular study. It's certainly been a very interesting meeting this evening. I've certainly learned a lot about the municipality. First off, I want to thank council, as they say, for the confidence in providing services to you. I also want to take this opportunity to thank your staff who have provided the information that's necessary for undertaking this particular study. They've been extremely cooperative, and they are the kind of staff that you like to have in a municipality to represent you in providing this very, very important service to the public. Because often your building officials are the frontline staff that the public meet and get to know your municipality. Just a bit of a bio for you. I'm a land use planner by profession. I've worked with over 200 municipalities across Ontario, preparing official plans, zoning bylaws, and things of that nature. I've also been a CBO, a chief building official, in a couple of municipalities. I was also a manager in the buildings branch and was responsible for the education program for building officials across Ontario. And when I jumped into the private sector in the late 80s to establish my own business, one of the services I began to provide was the review of building permit fees, actually planning fees as well, planning application fees and engineering fees. And I developed a financial model, which is the one that I've used for your municipality to help me with that. I also have conducted 30 or 40 development charges studies, in addition to about 40 or 50 building permit review studies. Tonight's presentation will be a high-level presentation because if we went through the spreadsheets for the calculations, there's over 1,000 calculations that were undertaken as part of this particular study. And just as a kind of a personal side, I think Councillor Sullivan will probably be pleased to know that I'm an active cyclist. I cycle 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers or more a year. And yes, cyclists do spend money for tourist items. So moving forward then, next slide, please. My mandate was to review the existing building permit fee schedule that's built into bylaw 1498, and to then look at the permit volumes over a particular period of time, to update the fees to reflect your most current budget. And when I was engaged to do this, we were looking at the 2018 budget year. Time has passed, and so we had to adjust that to the 2020 budget year. And certainly the mandate was to recommend new fees to reflect the scope of the services that are offered by your municipality on a full cost recovery basis. And I'll talk about that a bit more using the financial model that I've developed, and certainly to modernize or update your building bylaw. Next slide, please. The legislative framework for this particular task is the Building Code Act. particularly Section 7 of that particular act. And that gives the enabling authority for municipalities to determine the total fees, and they must not exceed the anticipated reasonable cost to administer and enforce the act. The reason for the change to the legislation a number of years ago was that some municipalities were abusing, and I use that word meaningfully, because municipalities were using the building permit fees to create revenues to apply to other services in the municipality not related to the building service. So the ministry decided to change the act to enable municipalities and require municipalities to look only at the anticipated reasonable cost to administer. The term reasonable was incorporated because, as an example, I've had a couple of municipalities who have had new hospitals built in their municipality. And when they levied the building permit fees, they were the equivalent of engaging the services of the building department for maybe 2 years or something of that sort, far in excess of what the actual costs were to provide the service. Section 7.6 requires a public notice, of which the clerk read this evening, setting out the requirements for a public meeting and as it relates to a proposed change in fees. Next slide, please. The general intent of the legislation, therefore, was to ensure accountability and transparency. And that's the reason why a report was prepared. It's a public report that has been shared with the building industry in your municipality, which lays out the methodology I used and the cost calculations that I undertook to determine what fees were appropriate in your particular situation. And the model provides for a full cost recovery. And the reason for that is that it avoids the taxpayer at large subsidizing private industry. In other words, your taxpayer should not be paying for the cost of the building department to undertake to provide the service when the revenues should be derived from the cost of the proponent or the builder, the construction industry itself. So this is a full cost recovery model, and it's not dissimilar to some of the user fees that you charge as a municipality, where the intent is to recover the full cost of providing the service that's given to the municipality. And the intent, of course, is to require full public disclosure for a change in fees, which your CBO has already pointed out to you this evening, was carried out through consultation with the building industry. Next slide, please. So the methodology was first to look at the building permit activity over a 5-year period. And the reason for that was to get a feeling for the trends, the peaks and valleys in building permit activity, so that we have a fairly consistent understanding of what the trends are. To review the building inspection process, although it's very, very similar in municipalities across Ontario, there are differences, and one has to understand how your process works in calculating the fees associated with that particular service. Then it was, the next step was to conduct a time allocation assessment for building department staff and other staff in other departments that provide support services to the building division. And what that means is that we calculated the average amount of time that it would take a building official to review the plans that were submitted as part of the application, to undertake the inspections required under the legislation, and for your administrative staff to carry out their functions as well. So there's a direct correlation between the time spent to provide the service and the costs for that particular service. And it affects both indirect and direct costs. Indirect costs being those costs associated with the services, the support services provided by other municipal departments to the building division. And as I've already said, the intent was to design a building permit fee schedule that would recover the costs, the operational costs of providing the service. And in addition to that would be to provide an adjustment in the fees to fund your cost stabilization reserve fund, which you call a building reserve fund in North Grenville. And that's a fund that's set aside for offsetting those flows, those ebbs and flows in building permit activity, because there may be circumstances where the operational costs, which are largely fixed costs, exceed the revenues coming from building permit fees. And in situations like that, which has occurred recently, you use the funds from the building reserve to offset those particular costs. And there may be extraordinary costs that might occur as well. For instance, you may have to hire extra staff if you have a boom in your construction industry in the community, or you may have capital costs such as the acquisition of vehicles or so forth that you might have to use the building reserve fund to fund. Next slide, please. The building permit process in North Grenville is, as I said, very similar to other municipalities across Ontario. It's broken down into basically four phases. Phase one being the application submission, which may involve some pre-consultation with the proponent or the industry itself, and to ensure that the applications are complete. It may require additional studies, such as those undertaken by an engineer or an architect, as the case may be. There's the application review, which is largely the plans review process undertaken by the municipality. There's the issuance of the permit itself. And finally, and probably most importantly, the inspection phase, because that's where value, where the value is to the consumer, because the intent of the building inspection service is to ensure safe construction of all construction that occurs in the municipality. And you may or may not know that there are some 10 mandatory inspections that are required for a single detached dwelling. So that is the building permit process in your particular municipality, which I had occasion to, as I say, discuss with your staff. Next slide, please. This is just a quick overview of the process, again, that I went through. Step one being to calculate the indirect costs of administration and enforcement. Enforcement being kind of the legal side, or the legal costs associated with the system of providing the service. So that's step one. Step two is the direct costs, and that means those are the costs associated with the building division itself, staff, salaries, and overhead costs. So the two of those equate to the total costs, which in turn are converted to calculate the building permit fees. Next slide, please. So the indirect costs are the operating and capital costs of all the municipal departments that provide support to the building division. And it's likened to the private sector, where you want to recover not just the salaries of providing the services, but all of the incidentals that go along with it, all of the materials that may be required, and so forth. So it's this financial model, in fact, is a business model, and certainly it's intended to reflect really the cost of doing business in terms of those the municipal departments that provide support to the building department. Next slide. And these are the departments that effectively that provide support services to the building division. The building division could not operate without these departments. In other words, the CAO providing the overall management of the municipality, the clerk being responsible for bylaws and records administration, finance department responsible for salaries, for procurement services, the fire department providing its expertise in the evaluation of building permits, HR obviously responsible for personnel matters, public works, their responsibility largely associated with the incidental services that are essential and necessary to support construction, largely water and sewer services. And then, of course, council itself being responsible for the overall administration of the municipality. So all of those are important services to support the building division. Next slide. So this is a sample calculation done for the indirect costs. So the finance officer, I looked at the percentage of time that that person spent on building related duties times the number of hours over the course of a year, times the salary and benefits and the overhead costs. And that translated to the finance officer spending 7% of that person's time times the 1,820 hours, or 32.8 hours total, times the salary and benefits costs. And that was calculated to be for $748.60. And the share of that person's the overhead costs was calculated to be $579.54. So this kind of calculation was undertaken for all of your staff that provide services to the building division. And that's summarized in the next slide. So the next slide, please. So here is the sum of the total indirect costs for each of those departments or management that provides support to the building division. So council, in your role in reviewing building division reports and making decisions on bylaws and so forth, amounts to $613.73 based on the 2020, actually the 2018 budget. The CAO, 1,700 and change, and so forth and so on. You can see Public Works does cost a fair amount in terms of the cost of their review of the building permit applications, as well as providing the overview and of services that are used or required to connect to construction sites. The adjustment was made this last year of 5% based on the consumer price index. So I adjusted the 2018 figures to 2020 by applying a 5% adjustment factor. So the CPI over that 2-year period amounted to about 5%, and that added 2,500 and change to the total fees. So the total indirect costs of all the support services to the building division was calculated at $44,969. Next slide. So the direct costs, so these the direct costs are the costs of the building division itself. So these are the salary costs of your chief building official and your other building officials and your support staff. And that amounts to $356,965. And that's again based on the 2018 budget. Overhead costs of $76,992, and then the adjustment, and that figure should actually read 5.0%. I apologize for that, amounting to $25,000. So the total direct costs of the staff in the building division providing the service, the building inspection service to your municipality in 2020 is estimated at $459,961. Next slide. The total eligible recoverable costs, and this correlates to my earlier comments about the anticipated reasonable costs as permitted and enabled under the legislation of the Building Code Act, amount to the indirect costs of the $44,969 plus the direct costs of $459,000. So that totals $504,531. So that's the kind of figure that you keep in mind as the figure you want to recover through the building permit fees that you levy to builders in your community. Next slide, please. Then we have to, of course, take that cost and break it down according to the types of permits that are issued, what we call occupancy groups, A, B, C, D, E, and F, and to other services that are provided, a change of use application, a demolition, which may occur from time to time. The farm community, they have their own particular requirements, solid fuel appliances, such as wood stoves and things of that nature. So we looked at the time allocation as it applied to all phases of building related to those particular classifications. Then we multiplied, we determined an hourly rate and based on the salaries and benefits and overhead costs for both direct and indirect services, and then derived a per unit cost for the purposes of determining the actual fee. Next slide. So this particular slide gives you an example of the cost calculation. So the CBO, and this is for a sample calculation for a single detached dwelling. So the CBO spends on average 0.75 hours in the review of a building permit or the overseeing of the issuance of a building permit and the inspections associated with this particular type of permit. And that translates to $44.82. The inspector, the building official, spends 18 hours on average, and that includes some 10 inspections, as I mentioned earlier, plus the associated administrative or work in the office in terms of the processing of that particular application. And that amounts to $853.02. The administrator or the building's clerk spends on average 2 hours or $66.78. And these are all salary costs. So the total salary / benefits costs for processing a permit for a single detached dwelling is $964.61. Added to that, and there's a correction here, it's not $23,928, it's $239.28. And that's the associated overhead costs of the building division itself. And that's added to the salary costs. Then there's the indirect costs. As I pointed out, we calculated those at $44,000. And when you break it down on a per permit basis, it amounts to $129.39. And then there's the indirect costs. The the budget for legal services amounts to $3.60 on average per permit. So the total base cost for a permit for a single detached dwelling is $1,336.88. As I say, based on your direct costs, your indirect costs, and the associated overhead. Next slide. Some adjustments are necessary in order for you to recover costs and to make the building permits reasonable in terms of the cost to the consumer. So I'm just going to go through some of these adjustments now. So next slide, please. Now there's a lot of information presented here, and I'm not going to go through all of this. This table of 5 is the summary as it applies to all of the different types of permits, occupancy groups, and so forth. But what I'll do is I'll just go through row 2, because we've been talking about a single detached dwelling as the example. So you'll recall that the base fee from that previous table was $1,336.88. The first adjustment that I make is what I call a cost recovery adjustment for cross subsidies. And why that adjustment is made is for this reason. For to give you the precise example, the actual cost to the Department of processing a building permit for a deck amounts to $617. And you can imagine that if you asked for that as a fee you would get a lot of objection by the public. They're not anticipating having to spend that kind of cash to get a building permit for a deck, particularly if it's a very small deck. So there are certain types of what I classify as minor permits where it's important to provide the service to the consumer at a reasonable cost. And so the cost recovery fee here is about $40,000 that's transferred from those minor permits to the major permits. So there is a cross subsidy between the major permits and the minor permits for the purpose of ensuring that most people are not turned off or see the fees as excessive for the kind of service they receive from the municipality for the review of applications and inspections. So that's the first adjustment that's made. The second adjustment is to provide some funds to contribute to your building reserve fund. And as I mentioned before, this is a fund that is set aside to offset operational costs when the fee revenues are less than the operational costs to provide the building inspection service in your municipality. Now, the 10% figure is varies from one municipality to the next, and I usually look at the difference between the peaks and the valleys in building permit activity and determining what the cost differential is to offset the valleys, if you wish, in permit fee revenues. And in your case as well, I also looked at the development charges study, where it was anticipated when I did this particular review that there would be a drop in the number of building permits that would be issued, and consequently less revenue to the municipality for building permit fees, notwithstanding that your operational costs would remain the same or increase over time. So the 10% then is added to the cost. The next is not an adjustment to the base fee per se, but to recognize that there are certain types of projects where there may be more work required. In other words, in your municipality, most of the single detached dwellings that are built are in the 1,500 square foot range, but you will get monster homes that are built, some with structural steel, that will require a lot more time for the building division to review the applications and to conduct the required inspections. So my particular model, which has been used in a number of different municipalities, provides for this adjustment without penalizing the average construction project for a single detached dwelling. So the 64 cents per square foot is added to those particular dwellings that are over 1,500 square feet. So the fee of $25, $15, $57 would be the base fee. And if somebody built a 2,000 square foot dwelling, then you would add the 500 square feet times the 64 cents per square foot. And that would provide a reasonable correlation again between the cost of providing the service on a full cost recovery basis. The balance of the table really is one of looking at the average number of permits for the various classifications and the revenue that would be generated to the municipality. So if you look in column G, the revenue of $284,000 relates to the multiplication of the average number of permits for a single detached dwelling over the last 5 years times the fee of $25.15, and column H adds column G is the one with the 10% reserve fund, whereas column H is without the reserve fund addition. And the reason for that is to give council an idea the differential, because under the Building Code Act, you have the option of deciding whether you want to fund your building reserve fund or not. And you have traditionally done that in North Grenville, and I would urge you to continue to do so. But I just wanted to give you an indication here of what the difference was in the calculations between not adding the surcharge of 10% to a building permit fee versus that 10% added. Next slide, please. So this is the balance of table 5 to give you an indication of the average number of permits being 384. That's in row 21 over the 5-year period that I looked at, and what the projected revenue might be with and without the cost stabilization reserve fund surcharge of 10%. Next slide, please. So the revenue generation then, I had mentioned earlier in the presentation that the eligible cost recovery was 504,000, and the revenue generation without the building reserve fund would be 488,644. And you may say, well, why is that not 504,000? My experience in working with municipalities is that there are additional costs, or additional revenues that are generated by the larger projects, of which I explained the projects of buildings that, in the case of single detached dwellings, are over 1,500 square feet. So that would generate extra revenues. So the revenue generation without the building reserve fund surcharge of 10% would be 488,000. With the revenue surcharge of 10%, the revenue would be $537,509, and that would generate $48,865, which would be deposited into your building reserve fund. Next slide, please. So based on the review that I conducted for North Grenville, I'm making a number of recommendations. I'm recommending that the building permit fee regime that includes revenues to be directed to the building reserve fund be adopted by council and incorporated into your fee schedule. And that is the fee schedule set out in table 5. And I've also recommended to this municipality, as I have to other municipalities, that you incorporate into your bylaw, your modernized bylaw, your updated building bylaw, a provision for an annual adjustment to the consumer price index, using the consumer price index as the mechanism for doing so. And the reason for that is because many municipalities they may have passed their building bylaw 5, 10 years ago or more, and as is pointed out, your current schedule is quite dated. And when you make the adjustment 5 years later or 10 years later, the adjustment provides a real shock to the building industry, and they're saying, well, what are you doing? Why are you charging so much? Well, to avoid those kinds of major adjustments, those spikes in fees, I have built into building bylaws the provision that you can adjust them annually. And that CPI I had mentioned earlier at 5% was the difference between your costs in 2018 and 2020. So that was built into the calculation. So there's a prime example, or the example of what kind of an adjustment you would make. So it's something that other municipalities have incorporated into their bylaws, and they've made those annual adjustments so that it's not a shock to the building industry. And my final recommendation is that council adopt a new building bylaw. I have prepared building bylaws for the City of Toronto for a large number of municipalities across Ontario. And the most current bylaw that I've recommended is one that reflects the best practices of other municipalities across Ontario, so that you have a bylaw that's updated and provides for delegation of, this is an example of a change that's important, delegation of agreements for conditional permits to the chief building official to avoid time delays in the issuance of permits for new construction. So those are my recommendations, and I'm certainly open to any questions. The final slide, if you wish. I'm open to any questions that council may have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tunnick. I really appreciate that. Gives us a very, very good sense of what goes into these calculations, which I think is an important consideration, certainly for our builders in North Grenville, who keep a very careful eye, certainly on the fee structure. Just a quick question. So again, just for my own edification, the last time there was a building fee increase in North Grenville was when exactly? How many years went by?
22 years, I believe.
22 years. Okay. So we can confirm it's 22 years since these building fees were revisited in this manner?
Yes, I believe that's the case, yes.
Okay, excellent. Therefore, it took you a little bit of time and lots of detail to bring us into 2021, I assume.
Yes, it was my pleasure to do so.
Okay. I'll just ask other council colleagues, any questions in regards to Mr. Tunnick's very thorough presentation? I think the rationale is clear. I'll go to Councillor Barkley. Go ahead, Councillor Barkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tunnick. I'm glad the mayor brought up that point that it's been 22 years. So might have been a bit of sticker shock for the building community. What kind of feedback did you get when you presented the draft to the builders in this community?
Well, I believe Mr. LaRue will answer that question in his presentation. There was varied, my understanding is there was varied reaction, but there's actually support for some of the changes as well. But I think Mr. LaRue has more of the details, Councillor Barkley.
Okay, well, before we go to Steve LaRue, I just have one question, and that's the stabilization, the cost stabilization. The reserve fund is set at 10%. Yes. Was that the same percentage we had in the past? You mentioned that we did transfer funds to a reserve fund. Was it 10% in the past? And if it wasn't, why 10%?
Actually, I don't know what the percentage was in the past, but it was it's 10%, and the rationale in the report is basically twofold, but it's interrelated. Is that when I looked at the development charges study that was prepared for the municipality, there was an anticipation of a decline in the building permit activity. In other words, new housing starts. And your building departments would remain the same size. Consequently, the fee generation would decline. And the 10% was seen as a way of offsetting a potential decline in revenues from their projections of, as I say, a decline in actual building permit activity for singles and for other types of units in the municipality. The second was with respect to the difference between the years where your revenues were less because of less building permit activity versus years where there was a surplus, if you wish, and the differential between the two is roughly 10%. In other municipalities, there has been a greater differential between the peaks and the flows, and I have recommended on the odd occasion as much as 25%. But again, in looking at your situation, I thought the 10% was reasonable. This reasonable anticipated cost that I referred to at the outset of my presentation, such that you would have fees that were reasonable for your municipality, not considered to be excessive, and still at the same time offset potential variations in revenues depending on the building activity in your municipality.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, there's a blurb to finish the public meeting requirement off when you're ready.
Okay, so then council will continue its deliberations after the public meeting is closed. Is that it?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and by virtue of the fact that we have no members of the public, it's your preference that we close the meeting now?
If that's what your direction is.
Okay, well, I would continue the conversation and then close the meeting before moving to a motion. Is that okay?
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll keep going then. I know the one part of Councillor Barclay's question was directed to Mr. LaRue. I wonder if he could give us some of his insight into how the building community received some of the information presented.
Thank you for the question. Yes, in my presentation, I will discuss how we did share our information, but basically we did provide three opportunities to the building community. We held 2 Zoom meetings, which were sparsely attended, but attended by the major players and some new players in the municipality and the building community. We also provided one in-person meeting. And what we also did was we recorded the Zoom meetings and we provided that information to all of our email chain for the building community. So they were all aware of the discussions and the questions raised. And they all had, when we sent the recordings out, we requested any further questions to be emailed back to our offices for us to answer those as well.
Great. Okay, so sorry, Mr. LaRue, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just trying to clarify procedure for this portion of the meeting. So the public meeting was to solicit comments to Mr. Tunick's presentation, and then we'll expect to hear from Mr. LaRue subsequent to the public meeting? Is that the case?
So you can continue, Mr. LaRue can continue on with his presentation, Your Worship. When his presentation is done, then the public meeting would then be closed if there's no comments from the public.
I see.
And then the resolution would be moved and seconded and then discussed.
Okay, subsequent to the closure of the public meeting?
That's correct.
Okay, excellent. So just, I'm just going to check in with council again, just cognizant of some of their needs. Council, do you want to carry on and hear from Mr. LaRue, or do we want to wrap up with Mr. Tunick, take a quick break and come back to Mr. LaRue? I'm just testing the room. Do you have a preference, council colleagues? Well, if I don't hear one, we'll carry on with this meeting and we'll take a break just before we go into budget deliberations. We'll go with that. I hear no opposition. Okay, so further questions for Mr. Tunick at this stage before we invite Mr. LaRue to elaborate further. Okay, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Tunick, for this your presentation. This question is probably more for Steve, Mr. LaRue. And or Amy, our Director of Planning of the department, or Gary. First, 22 years kind of questioning why it took so long for us to get around to looking at this. Maybe you've already covered that, but maybe I missed it. But the other part of it is obviously we're expecting increased amounts of revenue. Have you planned, Steve, for what that revenue will do for the department? Are we looking at an expansion, more staff? What resources are you considering with this potentially new revenue going forward?
Well, thank you for the question. The proposed budget for 2021 for the building division includes a hiring of an individual and hiring of another inspector, and the hiring of a student to support us as well as we're looking at purchasing softwares to improve our efficiencies, which will drive needs for hardware to run the softwares as well. And so the anticipated revenues that we should be getting are going to be geared towards that, and that with a view to, except for last year, we've had a steady growth in the number of permit applications, and right now the building community is indicating to us that that's back to the norm, back to where it was with our growth, which helped us get through the end of this year, and I anticipate that into next year and beyond. So the contributions that will be made to the revenue fund, building reserve fund, are anticipated to serve us going forward to maintain our current service deliveries and improve upon them by hiring staff and technology, using technology to improve our efficiencies.
And was Mr. Tonic's role to look specifically at the fee structure? Did he look at other things like you're talking about, Mr. LaRue, use of technology, et cetera, or those things that sort of fall into your role?
Those would fall into my role more. Mr. Tunnock's scope was to address our cost of services at a point in time, referencing historical data, so that we could come up with a current fee that will currently address our cost recovery and contributions to the reserve fund that will then provide us the opportunities to maintain and improve our service deliveries.
Understood. Thank you so much. So I'll go to any other council colleagues. Other questions for Mr. Tunnock beyond what we've asked already? Okay, and then I have a concluding question. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
This is just really, I guess, a bit of a follow-up for Steve. Are you in the process of developing a service delivery plan for the next few years, or have you already undertaken that, or whereabouts are you on that plan? And will you be bringing that to council to kind of give us a heads up of what the building department might look like in the next year or so?
Yes, Amy Amy Martin, the director of the department, and myself are discussing a work plan as a department, not just as the division, knowing that we both have separate duties, but it needs to come together more holistically because there's more that we can do to support each other to achieve the customer service that we need to achieve. So we're looking at that together, and that should be, Amy's got a scheduled, and she just gave me her work plan, and I have it right here.
We can, while you're looking for that, Mr. LaRue, I just have a question for Mr. Tunnock. Mr. Tunnock, is it unusual? Again, I think we're just trying to situate ourselves in the bigger landscape. Is it unusual for a municipality to take 22 years, or is it just one of those things that, you know, sort of stagnates and you sort of need a concerted effort to revisit the fee structure? What should council, whether it's us or forthcoming councils, expect to do in the future? I noted the CIP increase, which is obviously very prudent, and appreciate obviously you building that into the equation. But what should council or the municipality writ large expect to do in the future in terms of keeping its fee structure reflective of, you know, obviously, you know, real-time costs and forthcoming realities? And you're on mute, as I often am, so just unmute yourself. Thank you. You're still on mute.
There you go.
There you go.
In response to your question, and thank you very much for the question, I would make a couple of comments. I hate to say this, but
say it.
I think
You might as well say it. I've asked.
North Grenville is a municipality that's waited longer than any other municipality I've worked with to update their fees, and but fortunately, I guess you did have the reserve fund to call on, and it's been largely depleted as a result of the fact that your fees weren't adjusted. So that's the first comment I would make. But it's not uncommon for municipalities to have gone 5 years, 5, 6, or 7 years to before adjusting their fees. Now, I recognize this when I started doing these kinds of studies 10 or 15 years ago. And that's the reason why I proposed the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, so that the municipality or a municipality could make the adjustment on an annual basis without having to go through the complexity of a study every year. I mean, the kind of study that I've provided, I think it's fairly economical to your municipality by contrast to some other consultants in the industry. But I mean, if you were to conduct this kind of study every year, I'm not sure that it could be justified. But that's the reason for the CPI adjustment. It enables you to do it. But What I would suggest to council, I think, is to look at the tandem relationship between your development charges and your building permit fees. Your development charges studies have to be reviewed every 5 years and updated. There's a legislated sunset clause every 5 years. And I would suggest to council, unless there's some extraordinary circumstances, that 5-year timeline is not unreasonable to do a more comprehensive review, given the recommendation I've made of the potential annual adjustment. So what you could do is you can make that annual adjustment for the next 5 years. 5 years from now, do a comprehensive review like I've just done, just to see where you're at. Now, if circumstances change dramatically in 3 years because of whatever reason, you may want to do a major review at that particular time. But I would think that a 5-year time period is not unreasonable. It's not dissimilar to, as I say, development charges or the review of your official plan, that sort of thing.
Okay, thanks so much. So I think we'll go back to Stephen. If there are no other questions from council, then Mr. LaRue, maybe you can carry on with the plans for your presentation. Again, I am conscious of time, but obviously after 22 years, it's clearly worthy of some discussion. So we'll carry on with Mr. LaRue, and Mr. Tunnock, I assume you'll stay with us until we've concluded the public meeting.
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you, Mr. LaRue.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. I'll try to go quickly.
Do you have I don't note a slide presentation. Do you have one?
What I'm proposing is I'm going to go through the two bylaws, not all of every word by word. I just want to demonstrate to council how the bylaws will work and what the changes are and where we've worked with the building community to address their needs. Okay, so if we could go to bylaw 10215. And if we go to the table, okay. Okay, down at the bottom is where it starts there. Well, back up one screen. Half of it anyways. There you go. Construction, renovation, and reconstruction. This is where the building department fees start. So as you can see, they start with a base fee and a per square footage fee, as Mr. Tunnock pointed out earlier. The way this will be implemented is that the base fee will be charged at permit submission. When we receive the permit, the applicant will pay the base fee. And if there is additional charges for the size of the building, then those will be collected at permit issuance along with the DC charges and any other applicable charges. So currently, we don't have a structure like this. We currently have a fee structure based on two options. We have a valuation of $12 a thousand for the first 250 of value, $10 for between 250 and $1 million, and $9 after $1 million. So $9 per thousand after $1 million valuation. So that always created a discussion with the builders, and because the way it's written now, the option is to charge the greater of the two. So when they see that there's an option, they would like to get the cheaper one, of course. So we're eliminating that discussion with the builders and providing a better service on that basis. Okay. So the proposed fee will do away with both of these calculations. We are now proposing the base fee with the additional square footage. The square footages that you'll see here look like odd numbers, but those are numbers based on building code requirements. They identify different classifications of buildings. So these numbers are important to be at those thresholds to do that, so that we have the opportunity to address those different classifications. Okay, so So if we move down here, a new 1,500 square foot bungalow with partial finished basement and attached garage would currently secure a fee of $2,161. I'll get to a better representation of that for you in a few minutes. The proposed fee under this bylaw would be $2,516. That results in a $355 increase for a 1,500 square foot residential home with an unfinished basement and attached garage. So that's a 16% increase. So if we move down a little further, I will get back to these other ones we're missing. You'll see that we have some flat fees down here. So for smaller projects, we're proposing a flat fee, which recovers the cost of the services for the type of permit. And as Mr. Tunnock explained earlier, these fees are adjusted and offset to be a more palatable fee, not necessarily representing the true cost of that, but the true costs have been offset by being adjusted into other larger permits. Okay, so if we go down to the plumbing fees. Okay. You'll see here, there's a basic plumbing fee of $75. That used to be $30. And Section 6 is a new per fixture fee of $15. So in the past, if somebody was just proposing to add some additional fixtures to a bathroom, then we would do it, then we would do a $75 or $30 flat fee. We can't do much for $30 these days. So we've done a flat fee of $75, and then the additional fixture would be another $15. So this catches up, this gives us the opportunity to improve on cost recovery if they're putting in numerous new fixtures. Okay.
And Mr. Leroux, just a second.
Yes.
I know we have significant confidence in yourself and in the study. So, Council, do you want Mr. Leroux to continue with this deep dive? And we really appreciate the presentation, Mr. Leroux. I'm just conscious that we have to move on to the budget deliberations as well at some point. But of course, please point out anything that you feel is worthy of our attention. But clearly, the study was so thorough and you've worked so well with Mr. Tunnock. I'm feeling, I think, on behalf of council that we fully understand where some of the fee increases are, but I'll give you a chance to make sure that you highlight anything that you think we need to be aware of in terms of some of those shifts in the fees.
Okay, well, thank you, Mayor Peckford. Maybe what I'll do then is I'll address the components of this bylaw and the building bylaw that were concerns for the builders, because this may be similar to your questions. So the builders were concerned about the structure for conditional building permits, which is right here. Sorry. So we have a conditional permit for temporary site trailers. That wasn't their concern. Their questions were around the conditional building permit for the building agreement and a $300 flat fee. It wasn't a concern with the value of the fee. That wasn't the issue. In our initial discussions with them, we discussed an opportunity for a basement only building permit. After our discussions, it was found that a basement only building permit would be the equivalent of a conditional building permit anyways. It's the same process for us. So there wasn't really a need for it. And the fees that were associated to it were a little different. They would have cost the builders a little bit more than the $300 to do that because of the breaking up of a review process. So we decided to, because it was a conditional building permit anyways, we decided to eliminate that. I'm going to go back up to the demolitions as well. Demolition fees are a flat fee with $300 deposit to ensure sites are left in a safe condition and to close our files. Currently, we get $25. The proposed fee is for cost recovery is $305 for residential, $123 for non-residential. I went back to that because it's important to identify that in the past on demos, we didn't have the opportunity to go back and we didn't always get asked to go back and close the file and do a final inspection. That's why we have a $300 flat fee for a deposit on demolitions now. This will ensure that the builders want to get their $300 back, and that we have the opportunity to ensure that sites in our municipality are left in a safe condition and that we can close our files. Okay. We'll move. We'll move to the bottom of here for file searches and hard copies. Okay, maybe back up half a page, please. Okay. So there's been a few new requests come to the building department in the last few years that we haven't seen. They're not identified in the building code, but they're services that we're being asked to provide, some by other departments within the municipality, such as inspection for unit removals and unit verification requirements. There's times when the Public Works Department, specifically in the water department, water billing department, needs to know how many units are in the building to adjust their fees, because the owners are saying, no, I only have 2 units when they currently are being billed for 3 meter rates. So that is a service we've been providing that we haven't been collecting a return on. The next one is compliance for other reports. This would be for compliance reports. We get them now for the planning department, and they often ask building questions. If they come in with that request, then this fee wouldn't be charged. If it comes in specifically to the building department and is only asking us building related questions, then we previously didn't have a fee to collect for that service, so we've included it there. Scheduled inspections. Okay, that's an existing fee. File search fee. This is a new fee. It's a $100 flat fee. We're getting a lot of requests from individuals that have made offers on properties and want to obtain some information from a file. They don't currently own the property, but because they've got a signed offer purchase and sale agreement, they have some rights or the owner gives them the right, authorizes them to get information from the file. So we haven't had a fee for this in the past. So therefore we've instituted a $100 fee for there. Hard copies, that's $25 for a copy. We didn't have a fee for those either. So the refunds division here, that section in the bylaw, we'll get to that in a few minutes, has been rewritten because all our current refunds policy was identified whether they were entitled to it or not, and it was a full refund all the time. So we didn't have the opportunity, if they requested a refund in the middle of the process, to recoup or retain the costs to service the service we had provided them to that point.
I'm just going to stop you there and thank you again for such fulsome information. Just again, conscious of time, I'm just going to ask Mr. Dyke what we should do at this point in the meeting, just given what else is on our plate, and whether or not there's another way for council to get some of this information, but perhaps not all through the verbal presentation this evening. Mr. Dyke?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I mean, Mr. Tunnock and Mr. Leroux provided a significant amount of information that was included in the agenda package for council and made available to the public. I think we've hit the highlights, and Mr. Tunnock did a very good job explaining the methodology behind the justification for the rate increases. And Mr. Leroux has the information on what the fees have gone up. subject to direction from council, I would suggest that council move forward with adopting the report as recommended by Mr. Tunnock and Mr. LaRue, and anything specific regarding anything that specifically came out of the developers meetings, or that can be provided through a written brief from Mr. LaRue directly to council, which we'll put on the webpage as well for the public.
Council, are you comfortable with that approach? We've received quite a bit of detail, and I know we could be at this certainly for another hour, but just given everything else on our plate, it probably makes sense to get some of this information in written form.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. It was a very thorough report. I understand where the department's going and where the consultant has directed us. So I'm very comfortable.
And no doubt, Mr. LaRue, given what has been a static situation for over 2 decades, we appreciate that there will be, some questions and likely some concerns expressed. But I think the rationale has been made abundantly clear through the information you've shared and Mr. Tunnock has shared this evening. So if you're comfortable with that, just given everything else that's pending with the rest of the meeting, perhaps we could have Ms. Babcock-Cormier's assistance in closing the public meeting, and we could move to consideration of the motion.
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay.
So the remainder is council will now hear any questions or comments from members of the public who wish to comment either for or against the proposal. All persons wishing to address the proposal will ask their questions through the chair. Please state your name, address, and postal code prior to council. Council members may also wish to ask questions through the mayor. To those making presentations, please be advised that any member of the public who should wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed bylaw amendments can still do so after the public meeting is adjourned. Written comment may be received up until the bylaw amendment is considered by council. It is intended that the proposed building fee schedule changes will be brought forward for consideration today, January 12th, 2021. This public meeting is now closed.
Great. And then Ms. Babcock-Cormier, if you could just read the language of the motion that council is being asked to consider this evening.
Yes, Your Worship. Be it resolved that approve and enact bylaw 1-21 with further amendments to include greater than 1,500 square feet in sections 3A, B, C, and D to amend bylaw 10215 consolidated fees and charges for municipal departments to increase and add new fees. And 2, approve and enact bylaw 2-21 to repeal and replace bylaw 14-9, the municipal building bylaw, to incorporate new definitions and terminology in line with the proposed fee increases.
Good, thank you. And I will then look for a mover, Deputy Mayor, Liaison for Planning. Do you want to take that on? Seconder, please, Councillor Barkley, thank you. So the motion is on the table. Council colleagues, is there anything else you'd like to bring to Mr. LaRue's, Mr. LaRue's attention at this juncture? Please fire away. Councillor Barkley.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Mr. LaRue for all the work that he put into this presentation, and as he knows, we're already seeing some great results with the building department. I forwarded him a comment from a resident who I'd asked to give me some feedback on how he was handled, and he said the service was remarkable. So I think we're definitely headed in the right direction with Mr. Tunnock's review and recommendations, and I'd like to thank Steve again for all his hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Barkley.
Colleagues, anything else to bring to Mr. LaRue's attention before I call the question? Again, I think we all echo those sentiments, Mr. LaRue. I know there's been changes and lots happening, and the pressures on the building and planning department for many years have been quite significant. So I think you see that this council welcomes modernization and ensuring we're prepared for the future with open arms. So I'll call the question. Any objections to the motion as read this evening, colleagues? Seeing none, the motion passes. Again, thank you, Mr. Tunnock and Mr. LaRue, for your time. And Mr. LaRue, we look forward, I think, to more conversation in terms of some of the information you were sharing this evening. And we'll make sure to stay in touch with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. So, colleagues, I think at this point, and I think as much for staff as colleagues, we will take, I would suggest at this point, we're taking a 12-minute break, and we'll start again at no later than 9:15. If you could be online for 12 minutes from now, that would be most appreciated. But get up, move around, because we've got a ways to go on this one. Thank you. And if you mute and stop your video. Thank you. Okay, is everyone back? Do we have all of council? Seems that way, right?
Yes,
Are we waiting for any staff? Ms. Babcock Cormier, apologies, Mr. Dyke, nobody? We're good? Okay, so then we will resume the meeting. Of course, a longer meeting than we'd initially anticipated, but some very substantive discussion. I will move on to the consent agenda. That's where we are right now. So we have the tourism strategy. Ms. Babcock Cormier, have we dealt with that adequately? We have, correct?
We have the two items that are on the consent agenda are the Human Resources Health and Safety Policy Statement 2021 and the Planning and Development Conservation Authorities and Municipal Operations.
Right. Okay. HR Health and Safety Policy Statement 21. I see it now. Planning and Development. So to that end, I'm sorry, I don't have the motion in front of me. So I know there's a way of presenting the consent agenda in terms of feedback from colleagues in the event that they wish to remove an item from the consent agenda. Colleagues, are you comfortable with the consent agenda as presented? I'm looking for nods. We have, I think, consent on the consent agenda. Is that correct?
Yeah, and not quite. I just want to review, you say conservation authorities is also on the consent agenda?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
If you want discussion, we can have discussion. We just have to pull it from the consent agenda and then it will exist as its own item, is my understanding. Is that right, Ms. Babcock Cormier?
Yes, it's reinstated to the agenda for discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just for information purposes only, so I'm happy to have it on the consent agenda. I won't object.
Okay. So at this point, you'll leave it there and you were seeking information. Is that my understanding, Councillor Barkley?
No, I was originally going to ask you to pull it from the consent agenda,
I see.
but you can include it. I've just reviewed it quickly.
I see. Okay, great. You're fine as is. So any other comments from council colleagues? I don't see any, so I think we'll proceed with the consent agenda as is. And Ms. Babcock Cormier, do I need a motion to that effect?
Yes, that the consent agenda items be approved. So there'll need to be a mover and a seconder.
So I see Councillor Barkley and Deputy Mayor. Thank you. You'll note I have a cat in the background that's quite noisy. So if anyone wants a dog to start barking, I'll welcome that to drown out some of the noise. We'll move on then. We have no minutes of previous meetings. Is that correct?
Apologies, Your Worship. I just need that that motion to be carried.
Oh, I'm sorry. Any objections to the consent agenda as presented, colleagues? I see none. That motion carries.
Thank you.
I'll move on to minutes of previous meetings for which I believe there are none. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then on to Office of the Chief Administrator and Chief Administrative Officer. Mr. Dyke, do you want to address the items under your section, please?
The one, thank you, Your Worship. The one was the tourism strategy, which council already dealt with after the presentation, and then we'll move into the budget discussion. We can move in.
Okay, and will you be introducing the budget discussion?
Yes, please.
Okay, so then I think we're there. Thank you.
And thank you, Worship. Just quickly, and before I turn it over to Mr. Brookman for his first budget for the municipality, this is the start of the public process for the adoption of the operating budget for the municipality. The position, just to introduce the budget, and Mr. Brookman will highlight aspects of the budget as well as outlining the program, asking council to endorse the public engagement program that we'll embark on after tonight. I think it's important to note that this budget is you'll see it will be different than the one you saw last year. It's a transitional document that is part of the modernization program we started last January in 2020. It's reflective of the organizational changes we made over the past year, as well as some new elements of the financial piece that Mr. Brookman and his team have introduced for us to move us forward on the financial fiscal responsibility and of our obligation to the municipality. as mentioned before, this is the staff recommended budget. It'll now go into the public realm for comment, and that we will bring back to council for full deliberation by council at some subsequent dates. Another new piece that we will be introducing this year, not trying to steal much of Mr. Brookman's thunder, is that we will have two separate information sessions held. One that will be for the local media, that Mr. Brookman and myself will sit down specifically with the media to allow them to ask any questions, explanations on the budget process and content moving into the public engagement session. And those dates are being set up, as well as we'll organize an information session with the boards of both the Chamber of Commerce and the BIA, as well to let the business community have direct access to Mr. Brook and myself to discuss their comments on the budget and where we're going with the financing of the municipality going forward. And with that, Your Worship, I would just add that we're not anticipating a lot of like a deep dive into budget items tonight, more about process and where we're going next. With that, and your permission, I'll turn it over to Mr. Brookman to get into some of the details for council.
Yes, thanks so much, Mr. Dyke, and look forward to your presentation. It is also my understanding, based upon earlier discussions, that this is a very high level glance at the budget as it's been developed to date, but obviously the guidance provided by both the community and council in forthcoming weeks will shape the ultimate budget. So this is a starting point, obviously, for our community, and we look forward to more detail on specific items, because it's not really there this evening, and nor was it the intention to provide that level of detail this evening. So there's lots more to come, and I say that for our media colleagues as well as my own council colleagues. But we do obviously hope that you ask some good questions this evening, and the guidance we provide will obviously shape the framework within which this budget is developed. So it is an important conversation for us to have, even if it's just beginning at 9:22. We're up for the challenge, colleagues, as we have in the past, 9:25, I should say. So I'll move it over to Mr. Brookman and thank him for his time to present for us this evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As Mr. Dyke has indicated, this is really to inform you, to give you enough information to make an informed decision so that we can move forward with next steps. I'll just start. I'll leave the report as presented, and I'm going to highlight a few things. I'll start with the key findings. We're going to focus mostly on the operational budget. The capital budget, I am going to touch on a few key things, and then water and wastewater, because there's some significant expenditures there. We have staff standing by, and Mr. Ogunrinde is also here to support. So please do stop me if you have any questions, or if I have gone through anything too quickly. So as Mr. Dyke has already said, the 2021 operating budget, it's been reformatted. It's a transitional budget. It's a document that we're going to use to modernize the municipality, bring it up to date, and kind of reset things. We're going to take a breath. Certainly with COVID being what it is, and basically demanding that we slow down, it aligns well with what we were planning. So the realignment of the budget and the associated reporting documents are going to, or are meant to, significantly increase the administrative and fiscal transparency and accountability of the organization. And you're going to see that both through the budget process and through future reporting. So the proposed 21 operating budget has been developed in recognition of not only the municipal service level and capital investment, but it takes into account the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on our broader community. So at the end of the day, and what I'm going to be asking council to consider is that it adopt or allow us to move forward. Sorry, not adopt yet. We'll do that on the 2nd of February. Move forward with the staff recommended budget that we're proposing at a 0% tax rate increase for community engagement, and I'm going to outline next steps at the end of this discussion. So in December 2020, municipality applied for and was awarded 987 Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Great news for us. This of course was very helpful for us, and however is not available for other initiatives. We're not using it for to pay staff. It's really to cover all the additional costs that have happened with the phase 2 of our restart. We certainly appreciate the amount that we've received, and I've gone through just a summary review of that, and we've already used up that amount of money. So despite all the steps that we've taken, the costs of COVID on this municipality have resulted in us being it being necessary for us to use those funds, and I just want to make sure that that's clear, that that's aside to our budgeting process. It certainly is going to help us in terms of our fiscal management, but it's not a significant point for us. So why the 0% increase? So it's going to allow us to move forward. One thing that I think the public is going to ask us is whether or not it's going to create a future burden for the municipality, and it's not. It's not going to require inflated tax increases in future years. It's there to allow us to increase our strategic use of our existing financial reserve balances. That's why we're aiming for a 0% increase. It's going to improve the economic stability in the municipality, allowing us to continue operations in the municipality, allow us to continue with growth and investment in 2021, despite the challenges we're going to be facing. And one thing we're going to focus on a lot is the improved project management of our capital projects, making sure that we're planned out well in advance, not 1 year in advance, but many years in advance. So I'm going to talk to you specifically about the expenditures and really about the operating expenditures. So the 2021 operating budget includes an estimated total gross expenditure of $22.5 million to deliver a balanced budget. And the report identifies the significant types of expenditures such as salaries and benefits, contract services, and capital transfers. I'm going to touch quickly on those areas just to give council a feeling for what has driven those numbers and how we've come to them. So for me, I'm going to focus first on salaries and employee benefits. In 2020, we had budgeted around $7 million. In 2021, it actually increases to $1.3 million. And the reason for that is kind of threefold. About $490,000 of that is for 8 new positions, 5 of which are permanent. They're just necessary for us to be able to execute and provide the service level that's necessary for the municipality. 3 of them are temporary in nature because we're trying to see that we get the return on investment that we're expecting from them. The other 5 are required for us to be able to move forward. $460,000 of that is basically what you would expect year on year. So we got the cost of living increase, and we've got our staff moving up on the wage grid, which is a kind of a standard process for any municipality. So that's to be if there were actually no changes. Yep. Sorry, was there a question there? No. Okay. And $166,000 was for the firefighters honorarium, which was not budgeted last year. It's paid every year, but for some reason was excluded from the budget last year. And then we have a little bit of change in titles, roles, and then some increases in benefits and premiums that make up the balance. So that kind of breaks it down for you so you can understand that, yes, it looks like a big increase, but really it's part of that modernization. It's about bringing us up to speed, getting the right people in the right roles, and making sure that we're there to provide the service that is necessary for the municipality to operate effectively and efficiently. The next kind of large increase is in contract services. And this year we budgeted $4.9 million. Last year we budgeted $4.4 million, so an increase of $500,000. And that is almost completely attributable to the increase in our waste management services. That was a big increase. Council's already aware of that. They approved that a couple of months ago. We're moving forward with that, and that would be the bulk of the change that you see there. I do want to highlight that that the police services contract in 2021, much as we've seen across anything that's being federally funded, MPAC has put a freeze on their rates. The police services contract is flat this year as well. So in 2020, we had budgeted 2.4 million. In 2021, again, it's 2.4 million. So this is consistent with what we're seeing in terms of the government, all levels of government and all significant service providers for the government trying to help the community get through this or help our citizens get through this. So there's no increase there, and that's certainly welcome. One thing that, so when we made all of these changes, you'll see that the fund transfers, which is the amount that goes into our capital reserves, has decreased by about $1.2 million. We budgeted for about 2.5 million. In 2020, we budgeted for 3.7 million. And I want to be clear to council that our reserves are healthy. Because of the way that we built these reserves, we certainly have enough funds there to start executing against some larger capital projects, and I'll touch on those in a little bit. But because of where we're at, and because we're not highly debt leveraged, we figured it was prudent for us to accept a fund transfer of $2.5 million this year. It's certainly going to be sufficient for us to be able to move forward on the large and necessary projects in 2021. However, it will also allow us to assess those reserves, and I will be coming to council with some suggestions on how to probably put some better structure around how we plan for our reserves, how we spend our reserves, and how we manage our reserves. So that's forthcoming. That will be coming in 2021. But I think it's important to highlight and for you to understand that there is that decrease. And then I guess the next point is our tax revenues are not going up. They're going to stay at 16 million on the revenue side because we need to fund all of this. At 16 million, 2021 is basically exactly reflective of 2020. We're going to have a slight increase due to the number of houses that were built in 2020. So we'll have a little bit of a bump in our revenue there. And we're still assessing that. So that 16 million might become 16.25 million. But where we're at right now, it's certainly sustainable for us to be able to not offer or not require a tax increase in 2021, and will allow us to move forward and take that breath and really assess where we need to put our funds. I'm just going to take a pause there. Is there any questions on the operating budget? This is a very high level. I understand that, but I do have staff standing by to answer any detailed question that council may have at this point.
Brad, I think that you didn't mention North Grenville's success in securing COVID-19 recovery funds, and that those were really to capture lost revenue from both the COVID assessment center on Kemptville campus, as well as lost revenue from the municipality itself with the diminishing, obviously, rental revenue that typically would come in through both the ice arenas, if I'm not mistaken, as well as community rooms, et cetera.
Absolutely. So I did mention it on a total basis, but I'll give you a few details. It's a great question. So for 2020 spend, we got funding, and maybe I'll break that down for you as well. We got $436,000 that came in from phase one funding. Then we got another $900,000 of phase two recovery funding from the provincial government. That 900,000 plus the 436 is earmarked for 2020 costs. The second phase is allowed to be carried on into 2021 if we don't use all of it. And I'll outline for you quickly kind of what the costs are. And then we had $87,000 that's specific to 2021 spend, which is in comparison a very small amount, but certainly appreciated. So our total funding was about $1.4 million. Our 2020 losses, I'll break down for you kind of in large chunks. Our increase in operational costs totaled for 2020 around $720,000. So that was about half of it. And then we had lost user fees on top of that. So our lost user fees are in the range of $650,000 to $700,000. That comes from having to shut down our ice rinks and all the other services that generate revenue for us due to COVID. So the 720 plus the 700 come to about 1.4 million by themselves. The operation of the COVID test facility for 2020 was another $80,000 at a minimum. I'm actually talking to the staff there just to confirm that we've caught all of the costs there for 2020. And of course, the COVID testing facility is going to be there for 2021. We're not sure for how long. But we're estimating certainly until the end of vaccinations go out. So that would be, I would expect September. When I asked them to project what was going to happen over the next 9 months in 2021, we're expecting in the range of $130,000 to $150,000 of additional spend for the COVID testing facilities. So that the $87,000 that's set aside is certainly not enough. And I would say that we pretty much used up what we were provided for 2020. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. So council colleagues, I'll invite Mr. Bergman to keep going unless you have a burning question. I'm just scanning everyone on Zoom. I don't see anybody. Okay, so let's keep going, Mr. Bergman.
All right. So I'm going to go into the capital budget highlights. The details will be provided on February 2nd, but I certainly do have a lot of details here for you if you have some questions. The big things for the capital budget are we've increased our spend in 2021 to 9.9 million from our budgeted spend in 2020 of 8.1 million. That's an increase of 1.8 million. A lot of that is driven by capital projects that were halted either consciously by council in preparation for COVID, or because we had some budgetary concerns because some of the costs that came in for what we were expecting to move forward were well in excess of what we were prepared to accept. So those items resulted in us delaying a bunch of capital projects. We're going to have a lot of capital projects that are going to be executed in 2021. As mentioned previously, we're going to keep things moving forward. Our critical capital investment is going to occur. But while we're doing that, we're going to reassess how we plan our capital projects and making sure that we're properly funded. So we're going to create a new capital planning process, and that will be introduced and presented to council in 2021. So a big cap, I believe everybody's already aware of, is that our water and wastewater our water and wastewater processing plant is going to be need some expansion. That is separate. I just want to highlight that that's not included in the general operating fund. I'm going to talk on that next. But I just wanted to kind of highlight for you that for 2020, Public Works is going to have capital expenditures in the $7.2 million range. Parks and Recreation drops off quite a bit to 1.1 million. And then EPS is 643, which consists of two large items. One is they just need a water tanker, and they're going to start looking at expanding their ability to store their fire trucks. So they need a new building. if I was to break it down in terms of capital expenditure, about $4.6 million is going to go into roads. 2.8 million of the budgeted expenditure is from last year. So that's $2.8 million are carryover projects. Parkland rehabilitation is going to be $7.5 million. And then we have fleet and equipment at $622,000. So those are the big chunks of where we're going to do where we're going to be spending. A big chunk of that is, of course, County Road 43. So $2.6 million of our budgeted amount is specific to the County Road 43. There is an impact on the water and wastewater treatment plant as well, which I will touch on. About $500,000 is around the Wellington Road paving. And then we had the large portion of Wellington Road as well, which was another $1 million that we budgeted in 2020. The $500,000 should be added to the million. So we've got about $1.5 million that's going to be spent on Wellington Road. So those are the big pieces of capital investment that are going to occur in 2021 that were either carried over due to budgetary concerns or needed to be delayed for other reasons. Before I move on to
Council, is there anything that you wish to follow up on in terms of that piece of the presentation around capital? Obviously, I've got Councillor Sullivan. I think, Brad, certainly helpful information. A lot of what you're providing is verbal. It's not actually, fully captured in the presentation notes. So I think we're trying to catch up with you. And I know there will be more detail as the weeks go on, but I think this is a period where we're just trying to digest many of the highlights, some of which are on paper and some of which are verbal in nature. So I'll go to Councillor O'Sullivan. Go ahead, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you. And thank you, Brad, for the explanations. I do have a couple of questions, but did I just hear you say parkland rehabilitation, $7.5 million? I mean, that's exciting, but is that correct?
No, that's Public Works is $7.2 million. Parkland rehabilitation. Oh, did I say $7.5 million?
I think so.
I apologize. I'm not very good with numbers.
Sorry, how much?
750,000.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of carryover projects of 2.9 million, what are those projects? Can you?
So there's
Wellington Road one of them?
It is. Yes. Yeah. One little over $1 million of that is the Wellington Road.
Okay.
The other big one would be the CP Rail pedestrian trail. That's about $350,000.
CP Rail pedestrian trail.
Yes, so that's required for us to do because we have some obligations there because some of the infrastructure, provincial infrastructure, runs through that and needs to be updated. So we just need to maintain that.
Okay, I'm not sure what that is.
And I can't speak to the details of it. Who do we have online?
Excuse me, Your Worship. Mike Finley's here to address any questions on Public Works projects.
Thanks, Brad. If you don't mind, I can jump in there.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Great, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So that project is a culvert structure that runs through the old CP rail that needs to be rehabilitated through the Barnes Creek. So they're reviewing the structure on it to see what efficiencies can be found there to rehabilitate that project. Part of the concerns there is some of the major fiber optic lines and items that run above that structure that is adding to some of that cost. So we're still working that out at the moment.
Okay, is that between Hagen and Van Buren? Is that stretch?
I believe that is, but I would have to confirm that.
Okay, all right. And sidewalks, 100,000 for sidewalks for this year,
Correct.
Brad?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess we'll find out details of just what sidewalks they're talking about for that.
Correct.
Okay.
And then so just to highlight two other large expenditures. One's the the municipal center lighting, that's a project that's been ongoing for a couple of years, I believe. So 400,000. And then I already mentioned EPS, their tanker truck needs to be replaced.
And the railings in the arena, in Arena 1, they would have been part of that carry forward?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's another $50,000, correct?
That's already in the carry forward stuff.
It is, yes.
Okay. I don't know, I have one other question, and this was more operational, but when, before you switched into the capital budget, there was, under library, salaries and benefits was only 44,250. But does that obviously doesn't include the CEO. I just wondered why the salary for the CEO would not be included in that under library.
Under the library, I'm going to have to actually defer that until I get them here to speak to the budget.
Okay.
To me, I don't have the library in front of me. Hold on. I think I might.
I think Brad might be speaking to the difference, Doreen, between years, not the actual cost of the library, but you would have to direct us to the page.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's
yes,
cost differential.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Salaries and benefits is 2021 for the library is 445,000. The salaries and benefit for the 2020 budget was 433,000. So it's yeah. I believe that you're speaking to one of the differences, one of the variances.
Okay, because it doesn't look like it's a difference. It looks like that's it. Salaries and benefits, 44,250. And it's the same all the way across for every year.
If I could just jump in there. So the 44,250 that's on that line is the recoverable amount of the benefits for the library. So what happens is that the library has its own budget where they have the full costs of their salaries and benefits, but that 44,250 is paid through the municipality. So the library refunds the municipality for that amount, which we pay on their behalf.
Okay.
It's mostly made up of their OMA's cost, the pension cost that is paid monthly.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
I apologize. I had the full budget up for the library in front of me. Yes. So what Mr. Ogunrinde has mentioned is yes. This of the $554,398 that we're going to, or that the library has requested from the municipality, 44,250 is for salaries and benefits.
Okay.
Councillor Sullivan, anything else? I'm just going to invite other council colleagues.
No, I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay. I had a quick question on Wellington, Brad, and then I'll go to other council colleagues. We had lengthy discussions at previous council meetings in previous budget years about the extent of the rehabilitation on Wellington. We understand that there's a paving. My working assumption is that the redirection of the road between Ryan's Well and Wellington is off the table, and it's the paving and the underground works that is the priority this year. Would someone be able to speak to that?
I'll have to defer to Public Works.
Yes. Hi, Mr.
Hi, Madam Mayor. Yes, to answer that question, that those items for Wellington Road is for the current unpaved section that runs between Bridge Street and the other end of Wellington Road or West Stairway. So it is for the underground infrastructure. There's water, wastewater, stormwater facilities that'll be installed there as well. I do believe there is a sidewalk, but I'd have to confirm that. And then the paving of that section, it also reroutes, heads a little bit south to tie into a natural intersection at Bridge Street. So it's for those works that were planned. We were looking to plan to do some of that work in 2020. However, due to tender costs, it was deferred to 2021 to see if, due to the higher costs that we encountered.
Thanks. That's along the lines of what I understood as well. Thank you for confirming. Council colleagues, other questions in terms of capital or operating rather? I don't mean to exclude one or the other. Council Barkley, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that overview, Brad. I was curious to find out what you mean by healthy reserves. Can you expand on that? In what way are they healthy? Is there a certain metric that you measure the amount of reserves we should or shouldn't have?
Yeah, so we actually touched on this during our audit reports. The amount of reserves that we have are certainly sufficient for us to move forward with what we've got planned in terms of capital projects for 2021. My cautionary comment is that when I look at the guidance and the policy around how we structure and manage our reserves, it's pretty broadly stated. So for me to say that we have exactly enough reserves, too many reserves, or not nearly enough reserves for what we're planning, I can say that it's healthy. We certainly have enough to plan to execute what we need to do over the next couple of years in terms of capital investment.
So you're saying that our current policy regarding reserves is we should take a look at it. We should maybe take another. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes. Yeah. When I read what we have, it's not 100% clear what our target is and what we should be developing. It also doesn't address when we should be looking at debt financing and how we should do that. So those are kind of two unanswered questions for me. So I apologize for the vague use of healthy, but from a financial perspective, the organization is healthy, the municipality is healthy. We have certainly enough reserves to continue operations and do the investment that we need to invest in the capital projects that we have planned so far. So from that perspective, we're healthy. Can we put some more rigor around it? I believe we can.
I know the CAO wants to get in there, but the final part of my question regarding reserves is I'm asking you to sort of project into the future without doing the kind of study you want to do. But if you were to recommend a policy regarding reserves, would that mean we'd have more money to spend on capital projects?
So stated that way, difficult to answer. So more money to invest in capital projects. Can I just restate? I would say let's understand what our capital project demand is, and then look at how much of that do we fund through DCs, how much of that do we fund through reserves, how much do we fund through the tax base, and then how much do we debt fund. So I would invert if it's okay with you, I'd like to invert the question and say that step has not been taken historically by the municipality that I can find. So I think when I've had the opportunity to sit down and go through that, and that is one of my high priorities in 2021, I will bring back to council recommendation on how to structure it.
Okay. That's the end of my reserve questions.
I'll invite Mr. Dyke to get in there, and then I'll look to council for other questions. Mr. Berkman, it wasn't clear to me whether or not you had finished your presentation or were we just taking a pause? So do you have more to put on the table?
I still have to go to Mr. Finley's happy place, which is the water and wastewater area.
Indeed. I think that would be important. Okay, so we'll go to Mr. Dyke first.
Thank you. Just to build on the comments that Mr. Brookman had to Councillor Barkley, one of the things that we will be bringing forward back to council is actually a much more in-depth approach to how we invest in our capital, both in the short, medium, and long term. And that will create a scenario or a program by which council can make decisions on projects on how to leverage our money better. Instead of just having a pile of money and we collect until we spend as you go, what is the program by which we can actually be more creative and more responsible with the money we have to maximize the benefit to the community, beyond how we fund larger scale projects, things that come at us in the short term that we need to adapt to. So over the course of this year and into next year, Mr. Brookman and his team will actually be bringing those type of things forward to council for consideration, including a better program by which we'll evaluate and prioritize capital projects to move forward. So it's just not traditionally we spend X number of dollars here. It's what is a program that allows us to be flexible and modify how we spend and invest in the community, be it in the hard services, be it in the softer services, the recreation side of things, versus just always dumping the money into one specific area. So that's what will come out. And that will, I think, will start to clarify your question on the reserves and our ability to grow, to simplify my comment.
That's very encouraging to hear. Thanks.
And just to clarify that, so the draft capital budget includes no additional debt funding, just to be clear on that point.
Okay, Mr. Brookman, you can continue with the presentation then. I don't see any other hands.
Thank you. So we're moving now on to water and wastewater. So the 2021 budget is set at 4.5 million. 2020 budget was 4.7 million. That's a decrease of about $200,000. And that is entirely driven by our restructured user rates, or almost entirely driven by our restructured user rates. So the water and wastewater budget, I just want to highlight for council that it covers the budget covers the daily costs of running the water and wastewater utilities, including the processing of clean water, wastewater treatment. And it's legislated that water and wastewater operating funds must be self-funded. So what that means is no tax dollars go into this. We can certainly borrow from tax dollars, but we'd have to put it back. So that's our starting point. And because we've decreased our users' costs by about $200,000, we've had to find that in the budget, and we've done so effectively. So, sorry, I've just lost my cursor. There we go. So our operating expenses have decreased by 0.2 million, and that's basically just taken out of revamping the budget to make sure that we meet our requirements. And the adjustments are slightly up on salaries and benefits, and then adjusted a little bit in rent. Adjusted moderately in rents and financial expenses, materials and supplies, and utilities. So what Mr. Finley and his team did is make sure that we got to a balanced budget, knowing that we're going to have to incur quite a bit of debt in the future. And I'm going to touch on that once we get into the discussion around capital projects. So basically, not much change for water and wastewater. Operationally, it's being run pretty tightly, and they're doing a good job of making sure that their expenditures are in line with how much they can generate in terms of revenue. So there are two main projects at the wastewater treatment plant, which is a wastewater treatment plant. And the impact in 2021 is expected to be about $2.6 million. That is the first part of a two-stage development process for expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. The first phase is going to occur from 2020 to 2023 for about $20.7 million. So for 2021, it's really about getting this study completed that was started in 2020. And then hopefully once we get the RFP out, we may be able to break ground in 2020, but that's about as far as we would go. Mr. Finley, do you want to maybe add some color to that?
Sure, I can jump in for a bit of information background on that. As Mr. Brookman has identified, we are going through the design for the water pollution control plant expansion. We are hoping or intending to have that design completed roughly late summer, early fall, and then tender in the fall of 2021. And hopefully, depending on how the tender goes and then how long that process takes, try and break ground late 2021. That's why there's only a small amount of the funding set for this year. Probably a bulk of expenses will come in 2022 and 2023. We are looking, although it was identified that there'd be a two-stage process for the plant expansion, we are looking to complete the design as a single and potentially do all the construction in one phase to speed up and increase capacity at the wastewater treatment plant. That's a kind of a quick spot of where we are at the moment.
And with that in mind, so I would expect in 2021, I'll be working with Mr. Finley to talk about debt financing for the expansion. It's required that we for expansion we pay that with DCs. Our DC balance is not sufficient to pay for all of it, so we'll have to look at debt funding, which means we'll pay that up front to get everything up and running, and then as we expand, we'll use DCs for future developments to pay for that expansion.
And Mr. Bergman, if I might, just for the purposes of those listening, DCs are development charges that are applied to new residential and commercial builds. And I just so we're just using plain language. I understand that there was a long-term financing report that was done that was presented to council about how to prudently finance the expansion of a wastewater facility, right? That has a price tag of up to $35 million without in any way crippling taxpayers, right? This is a user-based system. So the development charges expected over the next 25 years are a big part of the cost recovery alongside user fees. Is that a fair summary?
That's correct, yes.
Right. So anyone that's not currently being served by municipal water will not be impacted by the expense associated with the expansion of the plant. Is that correct?
Well stated. That's exactly it. Yes.
Okay. So that's, I think, important for us to highlight. And before I was elected, the terminology of DCs eluded me as well. So I think it's just important that for the purposes of anyone watching, that they understand what we mean when we say DCs. So thank you for indulging me.
Absolutely. And that was a great clarification. Thank you.
Okay.
And then, so the second large project is again County Road 43. There's going to be $500,000 of impact on the wastewater plant, which is related to the County Road 43 bridge crossing for around $340,000, and then the County Road 43 piping that goes with that for around $120,000. So that's about $500,000 of spend for capital expansion that's going to be required as a result of that the development of County Road 43. And that's the highlights from the budget. Hopefully that is enough, or the intent of that is to give you enough information to be satisfied that the diligence and thoughtfulness put into this budget by engaging our senior management team. And I know we've engaged with council quite a bit throughout this process as well. I think we're in a good place to offer a 0% tax increase for 2021. It'll give us that time to take a breath, reassess, and really have a look at how we're running the municipality, do some capital planning, do some reserves, have a look at our reserve strategy, making sure that it's up to date, and just kind of reduce our spending for 2021 until we get through this COVID crisis. And then I guess I'll just summarize for you kind of what our next steps are if approved by council. So our next steps are, as Mr. Dyke already mentioned, we're going to engage the BIA and the Chamber of Commerce. We're going to engage media in advance of our public engagement sessions. The public engagement sessions will be in January 27th and 28th of 2021, and that will be published with approval from council. Our intended budget presentation date is February 2nd, 2021, so our first meeting in February. And we're going to do a review of community grant requests, and that's going to occur on January 19th, 2021 as well. So those are our next steps, pending approval of council to move forward with this budget.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And I look forward to my council colleagues providing any comment or feedback on the 0%. Obviously, given the year that was COVID in 2020, 0% seems both entirely appropriate and prudent, for the community and for taxpayers, whether they are residential or commercial. That being said, I think and believe that there are still significant investments being made this year, and those are important. Some of those haven't been highlighted, Mr. Brookman, including significant investments potentially in Riverside Park, as well as some neighborhood parks that I think have been very, very eager to establish, much smaller play facilities in their subdivisions. And another area where I don't think it's obvious to the public that we need to both contemplate and potentially pursue with some of that contingency planning around County Road 43. We're all very aware that there could be disrupted traffic flows. It will drive certainly a lot of vehicular automobile traffic into town, into thoroughfares that maybe aren't well equipped for both active transportation and cars. So I know that's another area where I believe certainly I, as mayor, and I think some of our council colleagues would like to have more discussion with you in terms of what are the implications for both this year and beyond, because of some of that planning obviously needs to happen now. We know that there will be some bridge construction likely this spring, summer, fall. So some of those disruptions may be happening sooner rather than later. Though there's a lot of detail on County Road 43 that we've yet to receive about exactly what the nature of those disruptions are, and cross our fingers it won't be as bad as we think it will be. So I think I just want to put that out there, that there are investments here that aren't entirely visible just by virtue of the high level nature of the presentation this evening. But I think they will be worth exploring with the community over the next couple of weeks. But certainly I think the 0% for 2021 is certainly something that I have an appetite to pursue for, I think, the reasons that have been obvious to all of us over the last several months. I'll just move to council colleagues, because really the purpose tonight, colleagues, is to give staff direction really on whether or not we are pursuing a tax rate increase, and to highlight any areas where you would like either more information, or you think if you don't have enough information, you want the information. And if you think you have the information, where you may want to direct staff to do some additional work for forthcoming discussions. As Mr. Brookman has highlighted, the community budget requests were received. I think some of us are aware that those are in the hopper. They were, accepted and received. And I think, Mr. Brookman, for the most part, they've been documented. And we look forward to the consultations on the 19th to give council an opportunity virtually to interact with some of the requester of those funds.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. There are some worthy recipients there for sure.
Okay. So I'm just looking to other council colleagues. Is there anything you'd like to bring to staff's attention for this evening, or any further comments? I'll go to Deputy Mayor and Councillor Barkley.
Okay, thanks, Brad, and Femi too, I guess. So you were involved in this project all the way along. I am definitely in support of 0%. And I know this is high level, so we're not going to get into the weeds, but I just want to tell you that this council for the last couple of years has been looking for this type of financial reporting, thoughtfulness. I don't know what other words I can use, but I remember early on with Pat in the past, let's just put increases at 2% per year to whenever. And I've always pushed that, the percentage of tax increase or not should be based on, what our needs are. And I don't think we always knew what our needs are. And I think that's the process you guys are going through now, especially on the capital side as well. What are our needs? What do we need to spend? And to John's comments before, it's like, we need to get a handle on that. We never had that, even with the auditors might say that, oh, we have, healthy reserves, or we have, but we never, I was always asking, well, why and how much, like John was mentioning, how much should we have in this pocket? How much should we have that? And it was never really clear. And I just want to say that I'm happy that you're heading in that direction, that we're going to be making financial decisions based on real needs, real circumstances, and not just pull a number out of the air, and hopefully that's going to work out in the future. So anyways, kudos. Thank you, guys.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Sorry, I've lost track. Is there anyone else? Councillor Strakian.
Okay.
And Councillor Barkley. Sorry, I'm going to go to Councillor Strakian and then Councillor Barkley.
Sorry, John, we trade spots every once in a while. Just mine's very quick. I think to echo what the Deputy Mayor has said, Brad and the rest of the team, Femi as well. This was a very thoughtful, in-depth and deliberate presentation. And I think that we definitely are wanting for that. I think throughout this whole process, we've, I think this council prides itself on transparency, and the more we can get this information out in a very clear way with reasons behind all those pieces, rather than just rubber stamping an increase every year, it builds confidence in the entire system that is this municipality as well. So I appreciate all the work that has gone into this, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussions surrounding the budget. With respect to the 0%, absolutely. I don't think you were always in a position to be able to do that without jeopardizing other projects or creating other long-term or future hardships. So when we're in a position to do that, and in a year such as the last 9 months plus has been, and the further effects that everybody's going to feel, local businesses and families and so on, I think 0% is absolutely appropriate for this year, and I'm 100% supportive of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Barkley.
Yeah, just echoing what's been said so far. Really appreciate the work you and Femi have done on this budget under Gary's guidance. It makes a lot of sense. It makes good reading. Totally in sync with the rationale behind the 0% increase going forward. I raised initially questions about reserves, and it's good that we're going to take a hard look at how we use them. Without getting into the weeds, because I know we all have our pet projects, but since Doreen started the ball rolling with specific questions, I'm going to ask, part of the carry forward funds, does that include the $90,000 to do the renovations at Maplewood Hall and Oxford Mills?
I believe it does.
Okay, great. So I'm still a good neighbor. Yeah, I would like to see more done in terms of the capital projects using the reserves, but until you guys get a handle on how they're to be used, I don't know how far I can push that, but I think, to echo what the mayor described as the disruption happening with the construction of the bridge on 43 and 43, I think we've got some increased traffic patterns that we need to be thinking about now in this budget in terms of pedestrian safety. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We're going to have some technology, and we're going to change our processes over the coming year. I'd love to have it all ready for you now, but it's going to take some time.
Right. Okay. But that being said, Mr. Brooklyn, I do think that we understand some of these things take time, but I also believe, and I look forward to hearing from my council colleagues on whether or not there is a long-standing capital project that may in fact align with this year versus next year. And again, I think it's very dependent on what pressures County Road 43, obviously may place on existing antiquated, insufficient infrastructure, in some of our town roads. So I know that the analysis does take time, but we don't have a lot of time either. So I'm hopeful that through the dialogue we have, with you over the next few weeks, we can identify with the Public Works team whether there is a project for which we may want to start setting aside some money, or puts, or tentatively, plan for some initial efforts, should it make sense. So I think there is more discussion to be had there. And again, the information about County Road 43 in terms of final engineering and tendering and what's going first is still in play. So it's hard to fully plan, but I'd like to be prepared. I think it's our job to do our absolute best to be prepared. And if we have to go beyond the anticipated capital spend this year, I'd like that to be part of the discussion during our budget deliberations.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm sorry if I misrepresented those questions. We can definitely answer. What I was talking about is getting the policy and the process around our reserve strategy and those other things that are going to take a little bit of time.
Absolutely.
Certainly, your questions we can answer.
And again, I just think as part of the discussions we've been having, it's obvious that the way in which capital projects, major capital projects, are financed in North Grenville may need to change slightly. And to that end, that may in fact create opportunity or enable investments that have been pending for over a decade that in fact would be worthy of pursuit sooner rather than later. So again, in the context of the budget deliberations, I hope we can have some more discussion about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm sorry, I got in there. Who's pending? Councillor O'Sullivan, go ahead.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Brad and Femi and everyone for this presentation and the explanations of everything. I'm also in favor of the 0% increase. Obviously, I would be concerned if it meant, pay me now or pay me later, and we would be in trouble down the road. So having you assure us that that was not the case was very good. And with respect to the reserves, again, I appreciate your explanation, because from listening to auditor presentations previously, I got the sense that we were okay, but we weren't quite where we should be. And so, I've personally always been a saver, but there's a point where you stop. You have to spend money to keep things the way they should be. So I'm happy for that explanation that we are in a good place, but we can continue to work on capital projects, because I have a few in mind. And so I appreciate all the explanation, and the fact that we can go with 0% is good. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, is there anything else that you want to ask staff this evening? Again, the hour is late, 10:19, but we have stamina, as you know. But if there is nothing else for you to bring to this evening's discussion, we'll ask Mr. Brookman or Mr. Dyke to wrap up this portion of the agenda. Looking for any hands? I don't see them. So, Mr. Brookman, any last words before I turn it back over to Mr. Dyke?
No, just thanks to council and yourself, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity to present this. I think it's prudent. I think it allows us to assess, right? It's setting us up for success for the future. It's going to be structured in a way that council is going to be able to make better, more informed decisions. So I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Okay, and we certainly look forward to digging down further in the next couple of weeks. There's no doubt there's lots more to learn about this budget, but very, very good work on the part of staff to get us to the point we are this evening. Mr. Dyke, anything you want to add before we move on?
No, just to reiterate your last comment that yes, this was a very high level piece. As we move forward in with the public and to the presentation to council in February, there will be the level of detail you're talking about regarding specific projects, specific spend areas as we move forward. But on the capital, and I think it's important to beyond the budget itself, is we will be approaching council again on reevaluating our capital investment plan, our 10-year plan. Going forward as to on its relevancy, how we're going to manage it, because it's one thing to things on the list is actually to have all the resources be able to fulfill those goals. And that's something I think has transpired in the past, is there was a lot of desire to do certain things, but the actual resources didn't exist to actually implement them. So we're going to try to get a fulsome program in place where we're actually going to talk about not only identifying projects, but putting the making sure we have the full resources available to see them through to their fruition.
That's great. I think music to our ears, there's no doubt. Okay, so is there a motion prepared in terms of moving forward with this budget, or do you have the feedback you need? I'm asking Mr. Dyke.
There is a motion, Your Worship.
Okay, so we'll get Ms. Babcock-Cormier to read that.
That council received the staff report, FIN 0012021, budget direction report, and that council direct the chief administrative officer and the director of finance to present the draft staff recommended budget as part of the community engagement program identified in the staff report, and report back to council on February 2nd, 2021 for further consideration.
Looking for a mover. Somebody say, okay, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Strakian, thank you. Calling the question, any objections, colleagues? I see none. That passes. Thank you. Okay, so we'll keep moving on here. Just trying to find my agenda again. We have, we are under Mr. Dyke, Finance, we're done. So Mr. Dyke, anything else from you this evening under Office of the CAO?
I think that's quite enough, Your Worship.
Okay. Office of the Clerk, I see nothing. Planning and Development. We, of course, addressed in great detail the Building Division fee schedule changes to Bylaw 10215 and Building Bylaw 1498. Anything else we need to do here? I'm looking to the Clerk's office.
No, there isn't. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Under Public Works, nothing. Parks and Rec and Culture, nothing. EPS, nothing. Human Resources, of course, this was part of the consent agenda, and for our information, council colleagues, is the Health and Safety Policy Statement 2021. And I think by virtue of accepting it on the consent agenda, we have now approved it. Is that correct?
That's
Ms.
correct.
Babcock-Cormier?
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship.
Okay. So we'll move on. Be sure to read that, colleagues, if you haven't. Informational reports. This is something that was also on the consent agenda, and that was conservation authorities and municipal operations. And I believe this is because of new changes made to the conservation authorities legislation at the provincial level. At this point, we're not discussing this further because it was part of the consent agenda. I'm confirming with the clerk's office. Is that correct?
You're correct, Your Worship.
Okay. Correspondence, none. Notice of motion, looking to colleagues, any notice of motion this evening? I see none. We'll go back. Introduction and consideration of bylaws. Of course, these have been addressed under Section N. Is that right? I'm looking to the clerk's office.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. So we are now at Section O, period, for questions from the public and the media relating to agenda items. I believe we have two party media reps that have stuck with us. Have you received questions from other representatives? And I'm just looking. Yes, we have Ms. Thompson, and I believe we have Ms. Rebecca with us as well. Any questions from members of the media? I'm hearing none from, Ms. Thompson, you're good? Looking to Paulina, I assume we're good. Clerk's office, while we're just waiting for Paulina's confirmation, have you received any other questions?
I have not, Your Worship.
Okay. Then if that is the case, we then will ask for questions from members of the public in regards to agenda items this evening. Anything from members of the public?
There are no members of the public in attendance, Your Worship.
Okay, and you have received nothing, is that correct?
I've received nothing.
Okay, excellent. Then I believe then we are getting to our closed meeting. So confirmation bylaw. And again, Ms. Babcock-Cormier, would you mind reading that?
That bylaw 3-21 to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on January 12th, 2021 be adopted and passed.
Okay, and can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? I've got Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Barkley. Thank you very much. I'll call the question on that motion. All in favor? Good, thank you. And then the final would be a motion to adjourn. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
I'm juggling screens. I apologize. There it is. Motion to adjourn. And I will look to Deputy Mayor and Councillor Strachan to move and second that, please. And that is that council adjourn its proceedings at 10:27 p.m. Just 33 minutes before our curfew, colleagues. I'll look to call the question. All in favor, just raise your hands. Do it a little bit differently this time. Thank you. Our meeting is adjourned. So a lengthy one to start 2021. Hopefully they won't all be this way, but appreciate your endurance, your focus, and your engagement, colleagues, and look forward to meeting with you again very soon. We are adjourning. Sleep well, colleagues. Thank you, staff. Take care.